If you would like to support the channel, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon. More information in the description below. The Spanish flu is estimated to have infected 1/3 of the world's population and killed 50 million people between 1918 and 1920. Entire families, communities, towns wiped out. We will focus, for now, on one particular mountain village in Eastern Europe which fell victim to the Spanish flu. This village has a rich and perplexing history kept mysterious through lack of records. It was a border stronghold once occupied by an ancient people who left ruins, ceremony sites, murals, and symbols in their wake. The purpose of them left unknown. The creators of these grounds left no traces of their intent, but perhaps intentions will become more apparent as we proceed. This little village was considered by more Puritan forces as heretical, but attempts to spread outsider religions here never really succeeded. In the very early 1900s, before the Spanish flu began to ravage the world, a woman named Miranda moved out to this strange mountain village, eventually giving birth to a daughter she named Eva. But when the Spanish flu came to the village, tragedy befell all within. The dead piled up, and Miranda did not escape the terror unscathed. Her beloved daughter, no more than 10 years old, died of the virus. Miranda was broken by this loss. After her Eva was put into the ground, Miranda walked into the wilds to a cave where she planned to end her own life out of sorrow, but something was in that cave. The heart of a fungal root colony which extended throughout the soil beneath the village. Miranda touched the root, and a cascade of knowledge from past lives fell upon her, memories that spanned centuries from those that had been buried near the village. Those people had been absorbed into the root, their DNA and memories with it, which meant little Eva was stored within the root as well. Miranda did not end her life. Instead, she took an interest in the fungal root and became convinced that she could use it to bring her daughter back to life. She took samples of the fungal root, which became known as the mold, to the surface and found that it could cure illness and injury. Miranda began to preach a sort of pagan propaganda of it, calling it a black god, and she would be its prophet. The village folk had been so terrorized by the Spanish flu that they fell in line quite willingly with this new faith. They took to calling her Mother Miranda instead, and she became a new head figure of the isolated village. For decades, Mother Miranda studied and experimented with the mold, using the residents of the village as test subjects as needed. Her eternal obsession was bringing her daughter back to life, but to do this, a suitable host would be needed for Eva to be placed into. To some varying degree, all of the inhabitants of the village were infected with the mold over the years. It kept them obedient and complacent under the order of Mother Miranda. Their black god was revered and worshipped. Mother Miranda was a part of their prayers. It was just their way of life. As the years passed on, Miranda used the mold on herself to remain unaging. At least one person was known to have eventually assisted Mother Miranda in her research. In 1951 or thereabout, a young medical student named Oswell E. Spencer became lost in the mountains during a hike and found himself in the company of Mother Miranda. The two studied and worked together on the mold, but it only lasted for a few years. Miranda and Oswell had extremely different ideations when it came to the mold. Miranda wanted it for the resurrection of her daughter. Oswell wished it be used to instigate a new form of human evolution. This difference caused Oswell to leave the village, though he went on to regret not saying goodbye to Mother Miranda. The two remained friendly to one another, and they went on to study and work towards their own life goals. The villagers, however, were not so fortunate. As Miranda's understanding of the mold deepened, so too did her cruel methods. Mother Miranda created something called a kidoo, a roundworm infected with the mold that acted as a parasite. The kidoo created conditions within its host that allowed it to incorporate other DNA into the host. A few examples of that we'll present shortly to make sense of it, but when the kidoo was injected into a subject, one of three things would happen: a horrible death, transformation into something undesirable, or a successful symbiotic relationship was created between the host and the kidoo. The horrible death occurred more often than not. A lesser degree of failure was the subject's transformation into a ghastly beast, such as a lichen or a varkolac. These dangerous creatures were cast out from the village or killed before release. And then there were the successful Cadou implants, where the host would take on the traits and abilities of foreign DNA placed into them. For example, the beings who would become known as the Four Lords, and please forgive my pronunciations, Alcina Dimitrescu, Donna Beneviento, Salvatore Moreau, and Carl Heisenberg. All four of these beings were infected with the Cadou at varying parts of their lives and developed superhuman abilities as a result, stories that we will delve into another time. And while the Four Lords became mighty in their own ways and were physiologically extremely varied, none of them were considered viable candidates as hosts for the rebirth of Eva. Therefore, in the eyes of Mother Miranda, they were all failures. Miranda's experiments and discoveries continued ever on and on, but in other parts of the world, echoes of her discovery bellowed, namely through the work of her once pupil, Oswald E. Spencer. What did he go on to do? Well, I'm so glad you asked. In 1962, Oswald commissioned an eccentric architect named George Trevor to build him a mansion in the Arklay Mountains near the famed Raccoon City. George Trevor accepted the contract and began designing a mansion that was full of mysterious traps and unusual puzzles. However, it would take a number of years before the project in the Arklay Mountains was actually complete. In the meantime, Oswald set his attentions to another part of the world, Africa. You see, in the 1800s, a fellow named Henry Travis undertook the venture of exploring Africa. His family owned the Travis Trading Company. Henry was able to use his wealth to fund the journey, and this man made amazingly detailed notes and records of animal life, geography, cultures, traditions, insects, flora, and fauna. Henry Travis spent 34 years roaming Africa. When he finally returned home, he assembled a 72-volume set of his discoveries called The Survey of Natural History. His work was widely discounted and shunned by the scientific community, possibly due to the slandering of his work by one of his older brothers, in an attempt to keep competitor trading companies disinterested in Africa. Henry Travis was heartbroken over this rejection of his passion and life's work, and he died only 2 years after his return home. The Travis Trading Company went on to establish a shipping, resource gathering, and pharmaceutical branch of the company. Using Henry Travis's volumes of work as a guide, the Travis Trading Company exploited the resources and people of Africa. In the 1960s, those three divisions were rebranded under one name, Tricell. But Tricell wasn't the only company with an interest in Henry Travis's discoveries in Africa. Oswald E. Spencer and two of his good friends and colleagues, Edward Ashford and James Marcus, took interest in something within Henry Travis's research, a flower called the Stairway of the Sun, which was part of the folklore of the Ndipaya people. You see, this trio of men had a bit of an obsession with the concept of eugenics. And according to tales told by the Ndipaya people, consuming this flower either proved fatal or a source of superhuman strength. The Ndipaya constructed dwelling places around the caverns that housed this mysterious flower to protect it and to claim it, though eventually a disaster of some sort forced the Ndipaya out of the caverns, but they did not abandon the lands nor their reverent protection of the flower. It was mentioned as a cultural mythos within the incredulous writings of Henry Travis, but beyond that, it was a secret to the outside world. The Stairway of the Sun was interesting to Oswald Spencer and Edward Ashford, but it was truly the third man, James Marcus, and his assistant, Brandon Bailey, that spearheaded the research. James Marcus hypothesized that the flower contained a virus that could alter DNA, that it was the key to the supposed superhuman abilities told in the stories of the Ndipaya. In August of 1966, James Marcus and his assistant Brandon Bailey and a small team of staff made it to the caverns where the Stairway of the Sun grew and began to study. For 3 months, they worked around the clock and fought off attacks from the Ndipaya. But early December, they finally isolated the virus. It was called the progenitor virus. and now they could finally begin to study and understand what this virus was capable of. Something went wrong, though. When the progenitor flower, the stairway of the sun, was taken out of Africa, specifically out of that cave, the progenitor virus wasn't present in new blooms. Back in their research labs in Europe, James Marcus and Brandon Bailey could not recreate the conditions necessary for the virus to propagate in new flowers. It was a complete mystery. Nothing worked. Their only source of the virus would have to come from their station in Africa, and getting access to it was exceedingly difficult due to distance, terrain, and hostile locals. It was nearing the spring of 1967, and in the Arklay Mountains near Raccoon City, Spencer Oswell's strange new mansion was nearing completion. Unbeknownst to the architect, George Trevor, Oswell commissioned another building project, this one under the mansion. An underground complex was being built, a lab and supporting stations so that the study of the progenitor virus could happen on Oswell Spencer's new estate. In the meantime, Oswell convinced James Marcus to move his research to the Spencer family estate in Europe and to maintain absolute secrecy of the progenitor virus and all of his research taking place. Near the end of March in 1967, Oswell Spencer convinced his two longtime friends to found a pharmaceutical company with him, which they would call Umbrella. Oswell wrote to his old friend, Mother Miranda, to tell her of his discoveries and that he chose the name Umbrella and its logo in remembrance of the symbols on the cave walls near that old village. In the fall of 1967, the Arklay Mountain Mansion and its underground labs were completed, but well, there was a problem. George Trevor caught on to the existence of the underground facility, and it was just too risky to let him leave with even that knowledge. So Oswell Spencer invited George Trevor, his wife Jessica, and their teenage daughter Lisa to stay as guests at the mansion, which they graciously agreed to. Jessica and young Lisa arrived at the mansion on November 10th, a few days before George Trevor due to his work obligations. And when George arrived at the mansion on November 13th, Oswell Spencer told him that his wife and daughter had temporarily departed to tend to an ill family member. The two men had a fine meal together that evening, and the following day, Oswell gave George an official tour of the now fully furnished halls of the mansion that he knew oh so well. But what George did not know was that his wife was going to die that very day beneath the mansion, and his daughter was soon to suffer a torturous fate at the hands of Umbrella. Jessica and Lisa became the first human test subjects for the progenitor virus. The mother, Jessica, was given a type A version of the progenitor virus, but the virus didn't fuse with Jessica's host cells. She was disposed of by Umbrella personnel on November 13th. Young Lisa was given the type B version of the progenitor virus, and this strain did fuse with the girl's cells, albeit slowly. She was kept alive for further experimentation, but her mind began to descend into nonsensical thought, and she began to lash out using her new physical strength. Umbrella personnel tried to convince Lisa that another woman, one of their staff, was her mother, but even in her cognitive decline, it didn't fool Lisa for long. Her father, George Trevor the architect, roamed the property of the Arklay Mansion for a few days, taking notice of the strange changes that Oswell Spencer had made to the grounds and the unusual furnishings that he'd chosen for some of the rooms. He was allowed to wander for a few days, but George Trevor was never going to be allowed to leave that forest. On November 20th, a week after his arrival, George made it known that he was going to leave the mansion the following day. Before his departure, while in the company of Oswell Spencer, George Trevor was incapacitated, drugged, and thrown into an inescapable gauntlet of puzzles and mazes. On November 31st, George Trevor accepted his fate when he fell into a pit and found a tombstone with his name on it. He struggled on a little longer, plagued by the knowledge that he had brought his wife and daughter here, that they too were probably suffering a cruel and violent fate. His daughter Lisa survived her infection. She was held in the labs beneath the mansion, chained up, and kept immobile for testing and study. Umbrella Pharmaceuticals was officially founded the following year, in the first half of 1968. Oswell Spencer was the driving force behind its official creation. James Marcus, the man who had originally traveled to Africa and isolated the progenitor virus, was rather agitated at the apparent greed of Oswell and was a reluctant participant in Umbrella's founding. If anything, it was a distraction unworthy of his time, but he was at the mercy of Oswell's financial backing, so he conceded. Umbrella would operate as a legitimate pharmaceutical company, but in secret, the progenitor virus would be studied and developed as a bioweapon for the U.S. military to keep the cash flow coming in. And while this new game of money and infamy began to gain steam, James Marcus and his assistant Brandon Bailey ran into an issue. They were running low on the progenitor virus. As it could only be cultivated in that far-off cave in Africa, another mission was required. Oswell Spencer stepped in, and rather than allow the extremely valuable James Marcus to risk his life on another adventure, Oswell hired a large team of mercenaries to remove the native Indipaya from the area and secure it for an umbrella establishment to be created there. The assistant Brandon Bailey returned to Africa with the mercenaries to oversee the steady production and shipping of the progenitor virus. Eventually, the Indipaya were driven away, and the foundations for the Umbrella Africa Research Center were laid. Access to the progenitor virus was no longer an issue. Meanwhile, James Marcus went on to head another new facility, this one in the Arklay Mountains in America, near Raccoon City, the Umbrella Executive Training School, a place of learning for young talent who could be molded into research and leadership positions within Umbrella. It was outfitted with everything academically needed to achieve this, including state-of-the-art laboratories. There, Marcus would act as the director, but in secret, he would head research into the progenitor virus. But there is a third member of the founding trio that we've not really spoken of. We know some about Oswell Spencer and James Marcus, but what of the last man, Edward Ashford? Well, for the most part, the virologist Edward Ashford seemed to just have gone along with the planning of Oswell, a like-minded man that fit in as a founder of Umbrella. His departure in the story comes at about the time James Marcus took his position as director of the Umbrella Executive Training School in mid-1968. Edward Ashford and his son Alexander took to their own studies in Europe. There was some competitive discourse between the founders of Umbrella, but in July, a most devious plot was set into action. Oswell Spencer ensured that a supposed accident would take place in Edward Ashford's own lab, an accident that would result in Edward becoming infected with the progenitor virus. Of course, this killed the third founding member of Umbrella. How tragic. Edward's son, Alexander, took over his father's studies as the new head of the ultra-wealthy Ashford family. Alexander worked as a researcher for Umbrella, but while his father was a virologist, Alexander was a geneticist. He lacked the skills to produce results in regards to the progenitor virus, and feared that his lack of ability would lead to the Ashford family being disgraced and Oswell Spencer taking full control over Umbrella. Alexander discovered genetic code within the virus that stimulated intellect, but it wasn't enough. The discovery was promising, but he didn't want to give it over to Umbrella. In early 1969, Alexander petitioned Umbrella for the creation of a new research facility, this one in Antarctica, based out of an abandoned mine. His proposal was a success, and by the year's end, Alexander had his own research facility at the edge of the world. Done in secret so as not to alert Oswell Spencer to his intentions, Alexander's studies of the progenitor virus now continued there in conjunction with cloning. This project was codenamed Veronica, after a long-dead matriarch of the Ashford family. Using the DNA of Veronica Ashford and genetic code from the progenitor virus that he'd discovered, Alexander eventually created twin clones, Alfred and Alexia, born in 1971. Project Veronica was a success, and while the boy Alfred proved to be intelligent, it was Alexia who excelled academically. For most of her childhood, the girl would remain hidden away in Antarctica. Now, let's halt here for a moment to talk about another scheme of Oswell Spencer. While James Marcus acted as director of the Umbrella Training Facility and the son of Edward Ashford studied cloning in Antarctica, Spencer undertook his own projects. Let's talk about one in particular, the Wesker Plan. At some point in the late 1960s or the early 1970s, Umbrella started to target children born to particularly intelligent parents. These children were taken from their parents and put into controlled environments where they would be groomed into compliance with Spencer's outlook on the world. If his progenitor virus could prune down mankind into a whole new, superior species, then there would need to be a future generation that carried on his beliefs. Otherwise, there was a risk to the certainty of his vision. These children were to be that foundation if they made it through the selection process. All of the children were given the last name Wesker, after the director of the project. They were provided outstanding educations and opportunities to excel unbeknownst to them. Even when they became young adults, Umbrella continued to monitor them all around the world. Let's talk about one very interesting subject in this project, Albert Wesker. Albert was heavily indoctrinated into Oswald Spencer's propaganda throughout his childhood, but it didn't fully sit well with him. Not because he found it immoral or questionable, but it just wasn't quite the right way of approaching eugenics. It was a source of anxiety and questioning for the young man that followed him as he grew older. In 1977, Albert obtained a degree in bioengineering at only 17 years old and was recruited to work at Umbrella as a researcher. He started out at the Umbrella Executive Training Facility under the supervision of Director James Marcus. There, Albert Wesker met another like-minded young researcher named William Birkin. James Marcus came to trust Albert and William with his research. They were made knowledgeable of the progenitor virus, surprising as James Marcus viewed the students of the facility with generally disdain and irritation. Albert and William both proved to be brutally committed to their work and highly competitive, but were not given outright access to the progenitor virus. James Marcus reserved that for himself only. In September of 1977, James Marcus made a breakthrough in his research. He combined the progenitor virus with leech DNA, creating a brand new virus base. He took to calling it the T virus, T for tyrant. And within 6 weeks, James Marcus deemed his new T virus ready for human experimentation. He'd worked his way through frogs, insects, monkeys, and rats, but no results were satisfactory. The self-aware, reasoning brain of a man was needed for control to be exerted over them. In fact, it was mandatory. Progress demanded it. He simply could not proceed otherwise, so he began using young students at the training facility for his experiments. Oswald Spencer and James Marcus began to truly turn on one another. The two, once friends, had become overly competitive and distrustful, isolating themselves and keeping vicious secrets regarding their progenitor virus research. By January of 1978, James Marcus was nearly ready to present his T-virus leeches as the future of Umbrella's bioweapons program, usurping leadership of Umbrella away from Oswald Spencer, only for himself. But signs of tampering began to appear around his lab, and then the order came down for the Umbrella Training Facility to be shut down, citing inquiry into human experimentations taking place there. Young Albert Wesker and his now competitor William Birkin were reassigned to Oswald Spencer's infamous Arklay mansion to work in the secret underground labs there, and they brought with them samples of James Marcus's T virus. But James Marcus himself refused to leave his private labs at the training facility and chose to stay there alone to continue his work, not knowing that William Birkin and Albert Wesker had taken samples of his T virus, that they had betrayed his trust. Alone and with little access to external resources, James Marcus's progress greatly slowed, and he just became relegated to his own isolation, ever diligently working on cracking the secrets of his T virus. In 1981, the Code Veronica clone Alexia Ashford graduated from college at only 10 years old. Her father, Alexander Ashford, had indeed created something from the progenitor virus that was of supreme intellect, and little Alexia Ashford was immediately poached by Umbrella as new talent and given a position as a head researcher at her father's facility in Antarctica. Alexia's achievements and promise were known to William Birkin, who viewed the girl as a rival that he was wholly displeased in having. Birkin was experimenting with incorporating the RNA of Ebola into the T virus to strengthen its potential as a weapon. Meanwhile, Alexia was creating her own unique experiments with the virus, using insect DNA that had dormant genetic code, not as an outright weapon, but to create evolutionary wonders. She outpaced him in almost every way. She took the title of youngest chief researcher of Umbrella away from him, and she hailed from a powerful family, and he hated it. Little Alexia also had a bit of an outlook problem. She was too young to be respected by her professional peers. She had no friends her own age. No one could relate to the girl except her own twin brother, Alfred. And, well, Alexia and her brother had a bit of an unhealthy relationship. Alfred fawned over Alexia, and she quite treated him like a servant. She was not a kind girl. She was quite cruel to those around her. She even viewed her own father with disdain. In February of 1982, Alexia and Alfred found their father's secret records room that contained files on how the twins were created. In retaliation for their unnatural lives, Alexia injected her own father, Alexander, with her version of the T virus that she had created, spliced with an ancient virus within the genes of queen ants. Her father served as her first human experiment of what she called the T Veronica virus. It turned him into a horrible beast that was locked away deep in the facility. But Alexia believed that she knew how to solve this violent mutation, and she decided that she would use herself as the next experiment. Alexia injected herself with the T Veronica virus and put herself into cryogenic stasis. By her calculation, she would need 15 years in that state for her body to fully adapt to the T Veronica virus. In 15 years, she would awaken and her research would continue anew. As Alexia slumbered and adapted, William Birkin and Albert Wesker continued to work on the T virus, now the puppets of Oswald Spencer, at the Arklay Mansion facility. The virus only had a 90% infection rate, which was unacceptable. William Birkin viewed this as a bioorganic weapon, but Oswald Spencer's intentions were kept elusive, something that fiercely bothered Albert Wesker. He couldn't crack what Oswald wanted with the T virus. He doubted that Oswald just wanted to monopolize military industries, but he didn't quite have enough data to see the big picture. Regardless, it had to have a 100% infection rate. There could be no immunities within the population, and this issue with the T virus would stall out their progress for a number of years. By 1988, Oswald Spencer's paranoia of his once friend James Marcus and his research on the T virus superseding him became too much for Oswald to abide. Oswald was sure that Marcus would solve the T virus puzzle and supplant him as the leader of the company, so Oswald ordered that James Marcus be assassinated. The Umbrella Security Service raided Marcus's lab and saw him executed. William Birkin and Albert Wesker took the dead man's research and began to integrate his findings into their own studies. James Marcus's corpse and his T virus experiment, the Queen Leech, were dumped into a pit close together. At this point, besides the problematic 90% infection rate, there were persistent problems with using the T virus as a bioorganic weapon. Animals and humans used during the experiments became aggressive and powerful, but they weren't intelligent enough to even comprehend basic commands. Their brains degraded too dramatically. They were unusable as weapons. But in an Umbrella facility in France, a possible solution presented: a parasite, referred to as the Nemesis Alpha. The parasite itself was not a weapon, but it could latch onto an infected human's brain and circumvent any damage taking place, bring a victim's damaged mind back to moderate intelligence, at least enough that they could understand basic orders. William Birkin theorized that using the T virus and the Nemesis Alpha parasite together would yield results, but successful bonding of the parasite to a bioorganic weapon's brain was rare. It had a very, very low success rate. A Nemesis Alpha parasite was placed into Lisa Trevor, now 35 years old. Lisa Trevor's body rejected the parasite and proceeded to absorb its genetic material, giving the woman a small degree of intelligence and causing her body to horrifically mutate into something beastly. Now she had regenerative abilities, ghastly strength, dangerous physical mutations, and a form of free thinking back. Torture for the woman. Progress for Umbrella. Samples taken from Lisa led to the discovery of a whole new progenitor virus, the Golgotha virus, or just the G virus. It was found that the G virus was a whole new sort of violent and powerful. It changed the DNA of its host to fulfill whatever needs may arise. It reproduced rapidly, never needs cease evolving, and mutates the body of its host into something lumbering, massive, and nigh unkillable without extreme measures. Though the G virus was not befitting the intentions of Umbrella's military contracts, research into it continued alongside the T virus. That same year, 1988, armed with the knowledge of parasitic host potential working in conjunction with the T virus, the Tyrant Project began. Elsewhere, the Queen Leech of James Marcus began to consume parts of his body and take on the form and identity of James Marcus himself, a process that would take years to complete. In Europe, the No. 6 Umbrella facility continued research into the intelligent Nemesis alpha parasites in the Nemesis Project. Then, into the 1990s, Albert Wesker departed Umbrella and entered the U.S. Army, gaining combat training that would later serve him very well. Though he remained closely affiliated with Umbrella and would return to their services, Wesker's ambition would lead him to seek out competitors to Umbrella as a means to steal and study Umbrella's data regarding their viruses and parasites so that he might surpass Umbrella as a ruling force over the world one day. William Birkin and his new wife Annette were transferred to a brand new Umbrella facility near Raccoon City called The Nest to study the G virus, and in 1993 began meeting with the Raccoon City Police Chief Brian Irons. Brian Irons would become compliant in covering up investigations involving Umbrella's experimentations in and around Raccoon City. His allegiance was an easy purchase: a political stooge who somehow held a seat of power, a malicious idiot with an anger problem. In 1994, the clone Alfred Ashford graduated college and, like his sister Alexia, went to work for Umbrella at the Antarctica facility. Eventually, Alfred Ashford would rise through the ranks of Umbrella to become an executive and a director. Then, in 1996, the Special Tactics and Rescue Service Division, or STARS, was created within the Raccoon City Police Department, and Albert Wesker was the head figure. STARS would be a response team to incidents involving terrorism or large-scale crime situations beyond the handling of the Raccoon City Police Department. Raccoon City had somehow turned into a bit of a hotbed of terror and crime. The creation of STARS would be advantageous, but unbeknownst to its members, their orders were manipulated by Umbrella leadership and the interests of Albert Wesker. All of this compounded into a powder keg of greed, malice, and hubris, which sat ready to ignite. And ignite it certainly did, seemingly all at once, in the year 1998.
Hey, it's up to us to take out Umbrella.
Something terrible was happening at Arklay Mountain. Reports of people going missing and killings taking place were reaching the Raccoon City Police Department. For years, the Chief of Police, Brian Irons, had assisted in keeping the Umbrella Corporation out of investigations and headlines. But by 1998, the headlines of Raccoon City were all about the grisly deaths. This city was always a bit of a hotbed when it came to illegal activities, but this was a whole new escalation. What could be behind it? Well, at this point, Umbrella founding member and father of the T-virus, James Marcus, has been dead for nearly a decade, assassinated on the orders of Oswell E. Spencer. But his Queen Leech has been sucking down that sweet, sweet James Marcus juice in the sewer he was dumped into the entire time, absorbing his DNA, slowly copying him, building its own body, becoming a copy of James Marcus with all of his memories, intellect, and malice intact. The new James Marcus was intent on taking revenge on Umbrella and watching the world burn, so he began using leeches to cause leaks and T-virus infections at the Arklay Mansion lab. By June of 1998, infected dogs were being spotted in the Arklay Mountains. A 20-year-old woman was torn apart, which made it into the news. There were stories of animal and human attacks, and missing person reports were stacking up. Beneath Raccoon City, in the Umbrella Nest facility, research into the G virus continued under the direction of William Birkin and his wife Annette. But the intrigue and fear of what was going on outside Raccoon City limits required a measured response. Umbrella and the chief of police couldn't just cover it up or pretend that it wasn't happening. It was just becoming too public. So, X-Day was plotted and schemed. Samples of the valuable T-virus assets would be retrieved and evacuated from the Arklay laboratory, and the facilities would self-destruct to ensure that all evidence and life forms in the area were wiped out. Albert Wesker would be the central figure in executing this plan, and as the order came down for preparations to be made, Wesker began to scheme his own cruel ideas. A STARS group was sent in, the Bravo team, but they were doomed from the start. The head of STARS and supposed Umbrella stooge, Albert Wesker, sabotaged their helicopter, causing it to crash in the Arklay Mountains. On the ground, the Bravo team found the wreckage of a military vehicle that was transporting a supposed criminal named Billy Cohen. Billy was the fall man for a U.S. military operation in Africa that resulted in the execution of 23 locals in a tiny remote African village. Once the murder of the locals was leaked to the press, Billy Cohen was set up as the perpetrator. In actuality, Billy Cohen was there but resisted the order, which came down from his immediate superior. The slaughter of the locals was some sick consolation prize for the outfit, kills to justify their journey and the loss of most of their group during it. The U.S. military's involvement in the area was highly criticized internationally as it was, and this group didn't want to just go back empty-handed. Billy's resistance made him the perfect fall man. The bodies of military personnel were in the wrecked van, but not Billy Cohen himself, raising suspicions that he was responsible for their murders and putting an additional objective onto the list of the STARS Bravo team: find this Billy Cohen and take him into custody. Not far off, one of the Bravo team, a young woman named Rebecca Chambers, finds a train completely stopped on the tracks. The Ecliptic Express, an Umbrella Corporation-owned transport en route to the closed-down Umbrella Executive Training School to investigate perhaps reopening it. But now on board are the corpses of Umbrella personnel and shambling victims of the T-virus. In another move against Umbrella, the new James Marcus attacked the train with his infectious leeches. All were killed or infected, and the Bravo team is at risk for the same happening to them. But Billy Cohen is here as well. And at least for now, the Bravo team member Rebecca Chambers and Billy Cohen will work together just to make it through this ordeal. The Bravo team is slowly torn apart one by one, leaving Rebecca and Billy to fight for survival together. Albert Wesker, once again in the company of his old chum, William Birkin, dispatches another STARS unit to the Ecliptic Express, the Delta team, and keeps close tabs on their progress. The Delta team gets the train moving once again towards the Umbrella Executive Training School and scout the train for Wesker, relaying information as they go. Wesker and Birkin have no intention of letting the Delta team survive the train ride. No witnesses. No one makes it out. Wesker remotely increases the speed of the train, ensuring that it will either derail or crash at the Umbrella training facility. And to make matters worse, the leeches of James Marcus consume the Delta team before Rebecca Chambers can make contact with them. The train is slowed enough to make the crash into the training facility survivable. The Bravo team leader, Enrico Marini, managed to make it here on his own, and he points Rebecca towards the direction of Oswell Spencer's Arklay mansion. The two Umbrella facilities are connected via an underground tunnel for discreet transport. Enrico begrudgingly leaves her here at the training facility to track down the MIA Billy Cohen and moves on himself to continue investigating what has been happening in these mountains. The ghouls and ghosties and long-legged beasties that go bump in the night at the Arklay mountain range are playthings compared to the brute that Rebecca meets in the facility. It is designated T-001, the proto-tyrant, the first of its kind, an empowered bioorganic weapon. It's lumbering, violent, and stupid. Uncontrollable, a failure, and now a health hazard. The best option in handling the proto-tyrant is truly to flee. Reunited and deep within the training facility, Billy Cohen and Rebecca Chambers make contact with the Queen Leech clone of James Marcus, who was truly all too happy to monologue his plans for revenge and domination, and to take the sickly form of a monstrous weapon to kill the two. Billy and Rebecca managed to destroy the Queen Leech of James Marcus and make it out of the training facility before Wesker detonates the self-destruct, taking with it all clues and evidence of what took place here and killing the proto-tyrant. Rebecca chooses to believe in Billy Cohen's innocence and decides to release him and officially report him as deceased in her mission. She will continue to the mansion of Oswell E. Spencer alone to search out survivors of any remaining STARS teams. With Albert Wesker now in the lead, another STARS team was assembled, the Alpha Team. They would travel through the mountains via the air, search out the missing Bravo team, and investigate their findings. This absolutely could not be allowed, of course, so the final stage of the contingency plan called X-Day began. X-Day was an order to scrub the Arklay Mountains of incriminating evidence in regards to what was taking place there. And what had happened at the Umbrella Executive Training Facility the night before was absolutely proof that the main Arklay mansion needed to be destroyed. Samples were to be collected of the T-virus and the mansion's self-destruct sequence activated, eliminating all STARS members, Umbrella staff on site, and bioorganic weapons loose on the grounds. And though the loss of this facility would be unfortunate for Umbrella, there was a silver lining. They would be able to obtain combat data on how trained soldiers fared against their current bioorganic weapons. So, some good could be salvaged from all of this. Good for Umbrella. I mean, extremely unfortunate for the STARS members, though. Before the Alpha Team disembarked for their mission, William Birkin injected Albert Wesker with a version of the T-virus that would give him greater chances at survival. Should something happen to Wesker that could end his life, the T-virus might be enough to strengthen and heal him so that he could make it through the mission. Wesker also threatened a member of the STARS Alpha Team named Barry Burton, specifically his family. He commanded Barry to assist him in getting rid of evidence in the mansion, or he would see that his entire family was killed. Barry felt that he had no option but to agree. And just like the Bravo team, things went to hell for the Alpha Team almost as soon as they were on the ground. One of their team was attacked and consumed by infected hounds, sending the team fleeing into the Arklay mansion. Now, this place was designed by George Trevor to be full of puzzles and traps, perhaps not meant to be used as lethally as they eventually were, but this isn't a place where the STARS members can just frolic about. And now, it's also occupied by infected Umbrella personnel that are just jonesing for some human rump roast. Jill Valentine, Chris Redfield, Barry Burton, and the Bravo team survivors, Rebecca Chambers and Enrico Marini, will have to push their way through the mansion just to discover what on earth took place here, and then find a way out. Not knowing that their own leader, Albert Wesker, has no intention of letting any of that happen, at least not if he can interfere. Most of what took place here comes from the point of view of one Jill Valentine. The STARS soldier was able to solve the mysteries of the mansion with minor interventions from the blackmailed Barry Burton, who truly did not wish harm upon Miss Valentine, but did eventually take actions that put her at risk. He had to impede her progress and destroy evidence alongside Albert Wesker. The Bravo team leader, Enrico Marini, discovered that someone within STARS was a turncoat, a traitor working for Umbrella. But before he could tell Jill Valentine all he knew of the situation, Albert Wesker murdered him. Ms. Valentine even found the adult Lisa Trevor, the first of the Umbrella experiments and host of the G-virus, and while not able to defeat the poor Lisa Trevor, the STARS team was at least able to remove her from their path forward. Over the course of the night, glimpses of the truth as to what Umbrella has done here were made known. Enough information that it could absolutely ruin the corporation. The heart of the mansion, the underground labs, held the most frightening of secrets, another tyrant, the T-002. Unlike the T-001 at the training facility that Rebecca and Billy encountered, this tyrant is moderately intelligent, a far more dangerous bioorganic weapon than its predecessor. Albert Wesker has already taken samples. Everything has worked out in his favor thus far. The last task is to see the mansion completely wiped out. But Jill Valentine and Barry Burton stand as obstacles, so Wesker releases the T-002, expecting the bioorganic weapon to attack the STARS members, but it is not so inclined to be picky about its target. Wesker should be thankful for his T-virus injection from William Birkin. The T-002 handles Wesker first, an apparent lethal strike, and then it turns its attention upon Barry, and more specifically, Jill Valentine. During the first fray with the Tyrant, Wesker recovered enough to slip away from the fight unnoticed. The healing properties of the T-virus truly did save his life, and while Jill and Barry fumbled their way through the underground lab trying to find Chris Redfield and a way out, Wesker activates the self-destruct of the building. This does unlock their way out, but time just became an extremely limiting factor. They could just leave Chris Redfield behind, but he might be important to the story later, so probably best to save him, right? The trio finally make it topside to an area that their helicopter pilot can receive them. The T-002 rears his ugly head and naked booty once more before the STARS team can be lifted out, intent on killing everything that it comes across. It takes a direct hit from a rocket launcher to stop the weapon, at least long enough for the STARS team to evacuate. That horrible mansion and everything still within is destroyed. All personnel, infected or not, Lisa Trevor, the Tyrant, data and records, samples, all of it gone. The survivors of this night, Jill Valentine, Barry Burton, Rebecca Chambers, Chris Redfield, and Brad Vickers, will rarely know a moment of peace in whatever remains of their lives. They were not intended to make it through this night, and their continued existence is a complication to Umbrella's cover-up. After the mansion incident, within a few days actually, at the end of the month of July, another T-virus infection event got underway beneath Raccoon City in the Umbrella facility called The Nest, which was headed by the once friend of Albert Wesker, William Birkin. You see, for a while, William Birkin had been making some odd choices in regards to the safety measures of his research. On-site staff were given antivirals to protect them from the T-virus, but Birkin began performing his experiments at such a rate that the waste processing plant near the nest couldn't keep up with the demand. It was a special process to completely get rid of the infected bodies. The T-virus began to mutate within the corpses, making the antivirals useless. And then staff began to show signs of slow onset infection. And while this wasn't an immediate outbreak, it turned Raccoon City into an outbreak time bomb. After his betrayal, Albert Wesker began working with a group simply called the Organization. While not an employee per se, but rather an associate of the mysterious group, their intel and resources would provide Wesker with everything he needed to track down locations of various progenitor virus experiments taking place around the world. His T-virus infection would make him more than human, yes, but it wasn't the apparent godhood that he so craved. He didn't have the right formula that would pave the way for a true human evolutionary event. As time went on, the T-virus would become more difficult for his body to adapt to, more unstable. He would eventually require booster shots to keep it under control, to keep him from turning into something monstrous. In August of 1998, the STARS team was completely disbanded by Police Chief Brian Irons, that stooge for Umbrella. Brian Irons was under immense pressure from William Birkin to cover up the sporadic infections happening due to water and soil contamination from the overrunning waste processing plant. And Umbrella was breathing down his neck to cover up any investigations into what happened in the Arklay Mountains. No one believed the claims of Jill, Chris, and Barry about what happened there, but even with the STARS disbanded, the team did not give up on their search for answers. Chris Redfield departed for Europe to explore leads into Umbrella facilities there. Barry Burton got his family moved to Canada so that he could pursue leads without fearing for their safety. And Jill Valentine remained in Raccoon City to investigate Umbrella and rumors of a facility beneath the city. Speaking of which, like we discussed before, studies into the G-virus continued beneath the city in the Nest, overseen by William Birkin and his wife Annette. In the aftermath of the mansion incident, William made strides in his research with the G-virus, nearly finalizing his work, and made an interesting choice regarding his research. He decided that rather than turn the G-virus over to Umbrella, he would instead sell it to the U.S. military. And the U.S. military was all too willing to accept his offer. Umbrella had for years received funding from the U.S. military on their bioweapons projects. They knew what Umbrella was developing. They knew it violated international law regarding the development of biological weapons. Birkin's decision to do this was surprising, given how many employees had been killed on the job at Umbrella and how well the corporation was connected to, well, everything. But I guess having a PhD and a fancy lab coat doesn't mean you have common sense, does it? Into the month of September, T-virus infections continued to occur within Raccoon City. Hospitals and clinics were at capacity or had to turn sick people away. This slow-moving version of the mutated T-virus provided days and weeks for terror and uncertainty to build within the city before reports of attacks, murders, and cannibalism began to surface. On September 22nd of 1998, William Birkin's scheme was sniffed out. Of course, Umbrella had connections within the military that would snitch on a traitor. Stupid of Birkin to think that this wouldn't happen. The Umbrella Security Service was sent into the nest, tasked with taking Birkin in alive and taking control of his G-virus. Birkin put samples of the T and G-virus into a case and made his move to leave the nest, only to be confronted by the Umbrella Security Service. Birkin was gunned down and the samples retrieved, but the USS team didn't search him before departing or ensure that he was actually dead. William Birkin kept a dose of the G-virus on himself as a backup plan should things go wrong. Enraged by his plan being ruined and that he was cast aside, William Birkin injected himself with the G-virus, to the absolute horror of his wife Annette. William Birkin's change was rapid. He became a towering, nigh unstoppable infected monstrosity, and he chased down the USS team. In the mayhem of his attack, the case holding the virus sample opened, and a vial of pure T-virus spilled out. A couple little rats started slurping up that sweet virus juice. I bet it tasted like cherry. And can you guess what happened next? Or I suppose the better question would be, can you guess how long it took? The infection spread amongst the rats in the city, causing them to mutate and bloat and spread it rapidly in their nests. The rat waste and corpses got into the Raccoon City water supply, and within 5 days, Raccoon City fell into complete, all-consuming infection. Jill Valentine was haunted by nightmares of the T-virus. She coped as best as she could with the memories of Arklay Mansion, threw herself into her investigation and her research. She was a woman of iron who refused to give up. And when sickness began to fall upon the city, she didn't flee. She continued her search. There's no way that Jill could have known what was coming for her. How could she? How could anyone know that Umbrella dropped multiple Tyrant 103 series bioweapons in the city? This is the Nemesis Tyrant, a highly aggressive T-103 with a Nemesis Alpha parasite embedded into it. Its sole mission is to hunt and kill any former STARS members still within the city, to ensure that they do not make it out alive. And the only two in the city are Jill Valentine and the pilot Brad Vickers. Brad doesn't make it very far. He's infected during their escape attempt, leaving Jill Valentine the only target of this bioweapon. Thankfully, while able to follow orders and comprehend commands, the Nemesis is not exquisitely intelligent, and Jill is able to give it the slip. This is the only option that she has now: run. It cannot be killed, and the city is falling so fast that if Nemesis doesn't claim her, then the zombie hordes will. Deeper into the city, Jill meets with the Umbrella Biohazard Countermeasure Service, or the UBCS. The UBCS was deployed as 4 full platoons. They were meant to help contain and stop the spread of the virus, but no one really knew just how quickly the spread would happen. And the contamination of Raccoon City's water wasn't known to the authorities, leading to infection within the UBCS groups as well. The UBCS went from 4 full platoons to just 4 men in less than 2 days in Raccoon City. There are survivors on the subway, and it's a way out of the situation. It just needs power and repairs, a process that Jill Valentine will aid them in. But things around here will only go from bad to worse. While these men are not its targets, the Nemesis will absolutely tear them apart to reach Jill Valentine. To flee the area, the UBCS soldiers need time to get the subway system going again, so Jill will act as bait to lure the Nemesis away from the UBCS soldiers so that they can prepare the subway. Looping about and returning here is her ultimate goal, which takes her through a disgusting, infested sewer, all the way up to the surface of a construction zone where the Nemesis itself intercepts her for a grand chase up a building into a spectacle of flame and violence at the rooftop. All of this is just a measure to just stop the Nemesis for a moment, to buy enough time to get the hell away from it, and you might be expectant that something that grand would be overkill, a massive explosion that took out a rooftop. But no, not by a long shot. These weapons are nigh unkillable, extremely destructive forces, and after all these decades of research and experimentation, Umbrella has cracked some sort of code with the tyrants. Get used to it. That's what's going on in the city right now. This is the gift that Umbrella will give to the world. The pursuit will continue all across this district of Raccoon City. The entirety of this has just been giving the UBCS a fighting chance to get the damn subway system active, which, thank God, they actually got it done in time. Two of its members, Carlos and Tyrell, have new orders to track down the vaccine research of a man named Nathaniel Bard, which will first take them to the Raccoon City Police Department to search out leads. But the subway's departure was just a little bit too late. The nemesis is here. It attacks the subway, something most fortuitous for one of the UBCS members, Nikolai Sonoviev, a two-faced jackal who's working alongside Umbrella and one of its unnamed competitors to make as much money off the situation as possible. He locks his commander and Jill Valentine out of a retreat to be torn apart by the nemesis. The captain of this platoon, an older man named Mikhail Victor, is having none of this, though. In the grips of the nemesis, the man detonates enough C4 to knock the nemesis off the train, cause a huge wreck, and give Jill Valentine enough time to put space between herself and the encroaching beast. UBCS members Carlos and Tyrell were moderately successful in tracking down information on Nathaniel Bard and his vaccine research in the Raccoon City Police Department. But upon hearing of the train's derailment from Jill Valentine, the man named Carlos departs from Tyrell to assist her within the city. Very noble, except Carlos won't be able to help Jill in time, at least not with this. The nemesis is evolving over the night to become what it needs in order to complete its mission. It's almost completely lost all human semblance and is a rampaging beast in this new arena. While Jill is able to deliver it grievous harm, there's no shielding from what the nemesis can do now. It infects Jill with a strain of the T-virus. While the infection is immediate, the effects are delayed. She won't change immediately, but Jill is extremely ill, and it's only a matter of time before she too becomes a shambling horror. The UBCS soldier Carlos finds her and takes her to the Spencer Memorial Hospital, where the man Nathaniel Bard was working in an Umbrella-funded lab to create an antivirus treatment and a vaccine. There is one single dose available, which Bard was trying to use as a ticket out of the city once the T-virus was loose. Seems there's a number of U.S. senators that were well aware of what was taking place in the city, and I wonder if there will be any consequences for them. Oh, sorry. That's funny, isn't it? Sorry. Carlos is able to track down the dose and discover the truth of what Umbrella had done in the city, and their intention to cover their tracks, destroy the city and the cure along with it. He delivers this single cure to Jill Valentine, and remarkably, it is the real deal. An emergency broadcast begins to play all around Raccoon City. A notice that on October 1st, in about 3 days' time, the city will be bombed into oblivion. All people still capable have until then to evacuate the city. Carlos and Tyrell will stand guard over the area, search for more of the vaccine, try to stall for time with the U.S. military, and wait for Jill to awaken so that she might leave the city with them. Meanwhile, not so far away on that same night of September 29th, a rookie cop named Leon Kennedy is en route to Raccoon City, anxiously anticipating his first day as a cop with the RCPD. Though he was told to stay away from the city, the young man has taken the initiative to not do that. Beyond the city limits, the naive young man encounters the T-virus infection at a gas station. It's already traveling beyond the city center, and blockades haven't yet been set up to handle the situation. Here he finds another of the Redfield family, Claire, the younger sister of Chris Redfield. Claire is searching for her brother Chris. With certain trouble awaiting them in the city, the two decide to travel the final stretch of road together to search out the Raccoon City Police Department for help. But do you feel that? The city, it's so quiet. Something is quite amiss. It's very apparent that something terrible has happened here. The roads are empty save abandoned vehicles, and the radio is broadcasting a troubling message to residents on where to seek shelter from the mayhem. But for Leon and Claire, this is really just the quiet before the storm. The T-virus has spread like wildfire, and thanks to the manic driving of a dying trucker, there are no longer any viable escape routes for Leon and Claire, who are separated during the chaos. The bulk of this tale will be relayed through the experiences of our young Leon Kennedy, who successfully makes his way to the RCPD, only to find the building menacingly quiet. This is where survivors were supposed to gather, where the police force made its stand. But it's so quiet. Leon's path forward comes from the notes of Elliot Edward, an officer killed in the police station during the outbreak, and an infected officer named Marvin, who will selflessly do everything he can before he dies to get the young Leon through the police station to an exit beyond the parking garage. The police station wings are inhabited by infected civilians and officers who couldn't stave off the virus. The whole thing is a tragic mess of terrible circumstances. It takes a few hours, but Leon is eventually able to make his way through the station and open up the passage that will lead him through the parking garage. But beneath the building, Leon meets a G-virus-infected William Birkin, who is still actively undergoing G-virus evolutions. Birkin being out of the nest and so close to the surface is bad news, though Leon could have no way of knowing the implications of a G-virus weapon running amok on the surface. Leon is barely able to send him back to a lower level, leave the underground, and reach the parking garage where he meets one Ms. Ada Wong. Ada Wong is a contracted mercenary of sorts, currently working alongside Albert Wesker and the mysterious organization that has a vested interest in Umbrella's research. Ada Wong is a mystery, but she'll do anything and everything to complete her missions, even if it involves using and manipulating poor, naive souls like Leon Kennedy. Ada Wong tells Leon that she's with the FBI, and he buys it, then just sorta tells him to buzz off, for now. In the jail section, attached to the lockdown garage, a journalist is being held, Ben Bertolucci. Ben was investigating the Arklay Mountain murders, the Birkins, and Umbrella, which led him to the police chief. And when Brian Irons found out that Ben was investigating him, he had him arrested and locked up. His imprisonment actually helped keep him safe from the outbreak. Ben promises Leon that if he can get his prison door open, he'll help him get out of the lockdown parking garage. He has a key. Leon doesn't. They need each other. But before the two can even reach an agreement, well. Remember earlier in the outbreak how Umbrella deployed multiple Tyrant 103 series bioweapons into the city? We met Nemesis, and now another lurks nearby. To get the cell door open and to get the damned parking garage pass takes our Leon back into the police department to get the power back on. But while traipsing about this seeming labyrinth of a building, Leon meets his own Tyrant buddy, the T-00. Community code name, Mr. Fedora. The T-00 is a far more deliberate and calm counterpart to the Nemesis Tyrant, but equally as lethal. It's here to retrieve a G-virus sample and eliminate all survivors it encounters in the process. William Birkin was recently beneath the station, and it just so happens that another sample is nearby. And if this is known to Umbrella, then the police station is the perfect place to begin searching for a sample. Leon completes his garage key card retrieval process, with the T-00 bearing down on him the whole time, hunting him through the station. Ada Wong is able to temporarily stop the Tyrant with a van and a small bomb, but as we know, such measures are short-lived successes. With this small victory, Ada Wong and Leon Kennedy depart the station and agree to work together, or rather, Ada Wong seamlessly manipulates Leon Kennedy into providing her assistance. They trek across the quiet back streets together towards an entrance into the nest. Not too far behind is Claire Redfield. She too has made it through the police station into the underground, and there she finds a little Sherry Birkin, the daughter of William and Annette Birkin. And this girl has been terrorized by the night, unable to find her parents, and her father is nearby. Claire gets her turn at combating the infected Birkin and takes custody of little Sherry once the coast is clear. Unfortunately, Police Chief Brian Irons is in the vacant parking garage. Once he was made aware of the T-virus being loose in the city, the police chief completely lost touch with reality. He became violent, and his orders became nonsensical. You see, little Sherry has a special locket that her mother gave her on her birthday, and hidden within that locket is a sample of the G-virus. Brian Irons wants that locket to guarantee his way out of the city with Umbrella. In his struggle with little Sherry, the pendant fell from her neck, and when Brian Irons realized this, he demanded that Claire Redfield bring it to him at the Raccoon City orphanage. What she finds upon arrival is that Papa William Birkin found a way into the orphanage and infected the rotten police chief with the G-virus. Sherry and Claire are able to reunite underground, beneath the orphanage where even more nest tunnels lie. But the T-00 is now in pursuit of the G-virus sample that little Sherry possesses. It's pure weird fortune that William Birkin, in all his rage and mindlessness, targets the T-00, ripping an entire section out of it and stopping it for now. But all parties are sent down into the sewers directly connected to the nest, and troubles will compound for Claire and Sherry as Birkin infected his daughter with the G-virus. Annette Birkin comes into contact with her daughter but refuses to stop her work to aid the little girl. The lives of millions are at stake, and her husband is still loose. Her lab is nearby. Claire can take her there, but that's all that she can do for her daughter. Annette sorrowfully bids Sherry goodbye and moves on with her work. In Annette's lab, Claire finds messages pertaining to an antiviral that can cure the girl. In her mother's stead, Claire pushes through the nest to find what is needed to save Sherry's life and to solve the mysteries of what happened in this place. Leon and Ada Wong also encounter the distraught Annette Birkin. But as soon as Ada Wong says that she is there for the G-virus, Annette knows exactly what she is implying. She sees through Ada Wong's words and recognizes her intentions. Ada is there to take the G-virus out of the nest with her, to deliver it to the hands of God knows who. And Annette refuses to allow that to happen. It all has to be destroyed. This process has to be stopped. Ada leaves Leon in the tunnels to apparently sleep through a gunshot wound that he took during Annette Birkin's escape. But don't you worry. She left him her jacket to keep him warm and to heal him. Ada pursues the doctor, but Annette is really not messing around when it comes to one human life versus stopping this virus. She puts a harsh stop to Ada Wong's pursuit, and she's lucky that's all she did. When Leon awakens from his magical healing nap and tracks Ada down in a pile of trash, she manages to manipulate the young man into completing the mission for her. Oh, that sweet, poor, naive boy. That's the power of a smooch. Alone and now in the heart of the nest, Leon finally does piece together what is going on here and how dangerous these viruses are. And when the two finally meet, Annette herself tells him what happened to her husband and the intentions of this Ada Wong character, how nothing of this lab can be allowed to escape. With Annette, it's not about a cover-up. It's about stopping the viruses here. William Birkin has become a monstrosity on par with the tyrants hunting through the city and deals a serious, crushing wound to Annette as soon as it's within reach. Leon and Birkin fight it out in the nest in a grand, wild, over-the-top fight befitting something as monstrous and foreboding as the G-virus, but in the end, it is Leon who wins, at least for now. These things don't really die that easily, do they? Blowing up on a roof, tear it in half, toss it down an endless pit, read it insults, nothing really keeps them down for long. Annette begs Leon to not give Ada Wong that G-virus sample, to just let everything burn down here in the self-destruct that's about to begin. At the exit, Leon plays a very foolish game of trust with Ada, believing that for some reason she won't shoot him, that she'd actually let him take her to the authorities, that people will do the right thing when given the chance. Oh, sweet young man. Jeez. Annette Birkin puts a stop to their parley, shooting Ada Wong before she herself finally succumbs to her wounds. The G-virus sample is lost down the length of the collapsing nest facility, and Ada Wong forces Leon to release her, allowing her to fall. It would seem a selfless sacrifice so that he can save time in pulling her up and get to safety, but we'll come to know later that Ada Wong has tools to make long descents a bit more safe. She's going after that sample. She's not helping Leon Kennedy. But he doesn't need to know that. 10 minutes begin to count down. En route to the shuttle that will get him away from the nest, he gets back in contact with Claire Redfield, who has found a way to save the life of little Sherry Birkin and is also searching for a way out of the nest. Best of luck to both of them, as Leon has other things to worry about right now on his escape, namely Mr. Fedora. The T-00 is back, and with a lovely surprise from Mr. Kennedy, its own little evolution. The calm approach of the T-00 is over. It's enraged, empowered, and has Leon trapped on a descending platform. It's not a matter of killing it, but surviving the descent. That is until an intervention happens. The one Ms. Ada Wong does Leon a solid favor and delivers an anti-tank rocket launcher onto the platform. It takes a direct, close-range hit for the weapon to stop the T-00. Oh, goodbye, Mr. Fedora. Your fashion was truly on point, you absolute creepy icon. Leon makes his escape aboard the fleeing shuttle leaving the nest, which thankfully Claire and little Sherry Birkin are safely aboard. For now, their stories have concluded, but the events taking place in Raccoon City are not over yet. It was before dawn of September 30th when Claire, Leon, and Sherry fled Raccoon City. But just past midnight on October 1st, Jill Valentine awoke, still in Raccoon City at the hospital with Tyrell and Carlos, now aware that Raccoon City's destruction is just hours away. Tyrell has been trying to get someone on the phone with the power to delay the missile strike, but to no avail. Carlos is still in the bowels of the hospital trying to locate where Nathaniel Bard kept a vaccine stockpile. The underground of the hospital is an expansive warehouse-like area. It's amazing that it was kept so secret. And it's not the friendly face of Carlos that Jill finds, but rather the smirking traitor Nikolai Zinoviev. After Jill's infection, he took samples of her blood and found it interesting that she hadn't turned into something monstrous several hours after the event. And here, a few days after it happened, she seems just fine. But his appearance here is just to be creepy, apparently. He hightails it before Jill reaches the weirdo room, followed shortly by Tyrell. He relays that the government will consider halting the airstrike only if they can get the vaccine to them before the scheduled bombing. Beneath the Spencer Memorial Hospital is revealed to be another umbrella facility, the Nest 2. While the Birkins studied the G-virus and experimented with the T-virus primarily at the first nest, Nest 2 is a bit smaller and used for bioorganic weapon information accumulation, or more specifically, how the BOWs fare in combat. A fair bit of study also went into cures for and preventions against the umbrella viruses, and the facility is far from empty. Even here, they are not safe from the nemesis. It has had over 2 days to recover and to track Jill. Tyrell is lost in the struggle, but Jill is once again able to flee from the tyrant into the Nest 2, which is full of various tyrant models and T-virus experiments. The employees here were also consumed by the madness of the infection event. Their bodies litter the hallways along the shambling amalgamations that Umbrella created in experimentation. But here also are the notes of one Dr. Nathaniel Bard, the man who poured so much into research for a vaccine against the T-virus. With his notes and reagents about the Nest 2, a vaccine is able to be produced, something to deliver to the U.S. military that should halt the missile strike, perhaps even save Raccoon City and those still within. But with this victory comes the remembrance that a certain beast is still searching for Jill, and something like a door, stairwell, or a wall will not hold it back. The Nemesis tyrant must be addressed before leaving the city, as must the traitor Nikolai Zinoviev, ever the opportunist. With the vaccine in hand, he offers a deal to Jill. Battle the Nemesis so that he can obtain battle data on it, and maybe he won't need the actual vaccine to get paid. Good luck. Have fun. It takes repeated direct gunshots, multiple grenades, a large series of fires, zoomies, one Mr. Carlos, and then an arena flooded with corrosive chemical to finally stop it. Do you suppose turning it into a puddle was actually enough to kill it? Oh, bye-bye, Mr. Trashbag Man. You weren't quite as cool as Mr. Fedora, but you were all right. Do you suppose Nikolai is going to keep up his end of the bargain? Well, yeah, I didn't either. Of course, he won't actually hand over the vaccine. He would like more combat data that Jill can create against the Umbrella bioweapons. And look at who it is. Oh, he survived after all. I was wrong. Good for him. He is just looking great. The Nemesis has changed yet again, and it will take an over-the-top and wild solution to bring this obscene amalgamation down. Seems Umbrella had some backup weaponry in case there was a loose tyrant. For as heavy metal as a point-blank shot to the face with a cannon is, one still kind of has to wonder, did that really get the job done? But perhaps it doesn't matter. The missile strike is imminent. No vaccine has been delivered yet, and the focus must be tracking down Nikolai Zinoviev to retrieve it, and then get out of the city. Nikolai himself proves to be a mild obstacle, a soldier who has used circumstances and surprise to his advantage when others were vulnerable. He destroys the vaccine, not thinking through the consequences of it because his unnamed employer wants Umbrella torn to the ground. The vaccine can rot for all he cares. And with him shooting that vaccine, well, there goes Jill and Carlos's bargaining chip for stopping the missile strike. The two overpower the man, not surprising, given what they just did to the Nemesis. And then the bargaining begins. But Nikolai's promise of selling out his employer and giving them money for passage out of the city is not going to be enough to save him from the hole that he has dug himself into. Nikolai Zinoviev will remain on this rooftop as Jill and Carlos leave the city to deal with the consequences of his actions. Those consequences being hellfire and destruction. Good luck, have fun, Nikolai. Bye. The lives lost in the city and the destructive measures required to contain the outbreak cannot be covered up by Umbrella. Not even they are that powerful. While investigations began into Raccoon City, a process that would take time, the corporation continued to push research into their viruses and parasites in secret. After Raccoon City, Claire Redfield departed from the company of Leon Kennedy and little Sherry Birkin. After the city was destroyed, the military found and took custody of Leon and Sherry. Leon was interrogated for his insight on what took place in the city, and then recruited into the United States Strategic Command, or STRATCOM. There, Leon would receive training and become a special agent employed by the U.S. government in the years to come. Claire Redfield, however, continued to search for her brother Chris. This took her to an Umbrella facility near Paris, where she was captured and then imprisoned at Rockfort Island, a prison complex owned by the Ashford family, and used by Umbrella to contain enemies of the company. During her imprisonment there, soldiers under the order of Albert Wesker infiltrated the island to gain information on the Ashford family, specifically anything pertaining to the studies of the T. veronica virus that Alexia Ashford developed. Wesker's team caused another T virus outbreak on the island, thankfully contained and unable to spread, but still devastating to those abandoned on Rockfort Island. With the kind of help of a young man named Steve Burnside, Claire discovers the existence of the Antarctica facility, as does Albert Wesker. Wesker has been on a hell-blazing mission to gather the many secrets of Umbrella's virus research for his own self-serving purposes. Before Claire and Steve depart for Antarctica, she contacts Leon Kennedy, who in turn reaches out to her brother Chris so that he might assist her in this extremely dangerous mission. At the Arctic facility, a severely injured Alfred reawakens his slumbering sister Alexia, who has been in stasis for 15 years and is now fully in control of her infection, the T. veronica virus. In the end, Steve Burnside is infected with the T. veronica virus and killed. The Redfield siblings are reunited finally. Alexia Ashford herself is killed by Chris and Claire, and Albert Wesker is able to extract a sample of the T. veronica virus from Steve's corpse. The Antarctic facility's self-destruct was activated by Chris Redfield, and the horror of that place was left to rot, alongside the last of the Ashford family line. In the following years, Claire would keep in frequent contact with the young Sherry Birkin as the girl settled into a new protected life. Claire began to work with an agency called TerraSave to help people impacted by bioterrorism. Chris Redfield tracked down Jill Valentine, and the two continued their investigations into Umbrella's global facilities, though time after time they found themselves at dead ends. A justice of sorts finally came for Umbrella in the year 2004, a full 6 years after the destruction of Raccoon City. Several companies had unwittingly aided Umbrella in their projects, by acting as trade partners, and every one of them turned on Umbrella as soon as the Raccoon City trials began to protect themselves. It took the combined efforts of these self-serving companies, the testimony of countless witnesses, and the discovery of secret Umbrella documents to bring the company down via bankruptcy. The lawyers of Umbrella were actually almost able to refute the prosecution's claims based on a lack of evidence. But in 2004, Umbrella was found to be responsible for Raccoon City and guilty of violating international bioterrorism laws. The U.S. government and the military were not held responsible in any way for their own involvement in Umbrella's affairs. Knowledge of military funding into their projects was withheld. The company was liquidated, compensation was paid out to the victims of their work, and a manhunt for Oswell E. Spencer began. But this is far, far from the end. Remember, there were rivals to Umbrella that sought their downfall, that benefited greatly from its demise. Albert Wesker and the mysterious organization he was integrated into had in their possession the T virus, the G virus, and the T Veronica virus. Dealings with terrorist organizations interested in purchasing the bioweapons was already underway. In 2004, Albert Wesker began working with a geneticist named Excella Gione. Giving her samples and information related to the T virus, Excella was able to integrate the T virus into TriCell's bioweapons division, propelling her into a position of power within the company and a puppet of Albert Wesker. Excella Gione would become the CEO of TriCell Africa, where the progenitor virus source lay. The mysterious organization was integrated into TriCell, where studies of the progenitor virus and the T virus would lead to new and horrific tools of bioterrorism under the banner of TriCell. But before that new horror is revealed to the world, in the year 2004, a kidnapping would take place. The president's daughter, and deployed to save the day, would be the now veteran STRATCOM agent, Leon Kennedy. Let's go to a different time, and an entirely new place for now, to a secluded region of Spain where a pagan religion once thrived. Generations ago, the inhabitants of this region practiced the worship of something called the Plaga. The eggs of these creatures were injected into worshippers or victims of the faith. As the Plaga grew within the host, it would attach itself to the sternum of the human and develop a symbiotic relationship with them. Those who survived the process were called ganados. Much like the Indipaya of Africa and their progenitor flower, the ganados gained superhuman strength and stamina at the cost of their ability to think freely and rationally. The parasite took over, and the human aspect was lost. But amongst the ganados, generally, there was peace. The Plaga was a social and communal parasite with its own form of communication, and the creatures did not wish for their hosts to die, taking great measures to protect them if a threat came near. Much like the worship of the mold in Mother Miranda's village, the worship of the Plaga in this remote region of Spain was considered a pagan faith, but unlike the village of Mother Miranda, this strange religion was not tolerated or overlooked by external forces indefinitely. Sometime within the 15th or 16th century, a man named Salazar led an armed force into the lands of these pagans to cut them down in the name of the Catholic Church. At the end of the slaughter, after much of the population had been killed and burned, Salazar and his men sealed the Plaga under a castle, and he himself took to ruling these lands, establishing the name Salazar as the new ruling line. The cultish practices of the people were fully wiped out, and a sort of normalcy came to the land. But all of that changed a few hundred years later, in the late 1990s. A researcher by the name of Dr. Osmond Sadler heard rumor of an old potential biological weapon hidden away within this distant region of Spain, and he decided to investigate the claim. Osmond Sadler had aspirations of control and dominance, and when he heard stories of the Plaga, he saw in it potential to use it for his own selfish purposes. If the Plaga could be understood, controlled, and weaponized, then the entire world could be brought under his heel. And when he arrived, Sadler read the people of this region like a book, in particular the very young ruler, Ramon Salazar, and he presented himself under the guise of a priestly figure. Ramon Salazar was a young man, no more than 20 years old, whose face betrayed a countenance double that number, but he had the body that seemed half that age. He had no family to speak of, no family elders to keep him in check and offer guidance. The sickly Ramon Salazar was able to be manipulated by Osmond Sadler. The doctor convinced him that he was a prophet and that Ramon needed to make amends for the deeds of his family line, namely the conquering of this area and the suppression of the worship of the Plaga. Ramon Salazar gave Osmond Sadler full access to the sealed-off caves beneath the castle that held the now mummified bodies of the ancient Plaga parasites. Locals were recruited to act as an excavation workforce, and during the excavation, these unlucky locals were infected. The corpses of the Plaga parasites began to emit tiny, barely perceivable spores. Research into the carcasses of the Plaga commenced topside, spearheaded by a doctor named Luis Serra. Luis Serra was a native of the region and quite fell under the manipulative spell of Osmond Sadler. He fully assisted in the research of the Plaga and the study of its possible mutations. As the years passed and the new millennium rolled about, the infected villagers who assisted in the still ongoing excavations began to get sick, which meant almost the entirety of the village. The spores that they had inhaled over the years was the Plaga entering their bodies to use them as incubators for their resurrection. A new generation of ganados was awakening, much to the terror of the village inhabitants. Through his studies, Luis Serra aided in altering and strengthening the Plaga, making them exceedingly difficult to kill through blunt violence, their only true weakness being UV radiation, though it would take a concentrated amount of it just to kill a young Plaga. Trying to kill or remove a fully formed and embedded Plaga parasite would almost certainly kill the host as well. The Plaga began to completely overtake the infected villagers, turning them into almost mindless, shambling hosts that had complete loyalty to their prophet, Osmond Sadler. And so a new cult sprouted forth called Los Illuminados. Sadler's sojourn into discovering and cultivating the new bioweapon was revealing itself to be quite the success. He was ready to take the next step in his plan, which put a target on the heads of United States leadership. Luis Serra started to kind of resent Osmond Sadler. He no longer believed in the words of the prophet, and he wanted a way out of what was developing. So, in 2004, he emailed an old friend from his college days to get assistance in leaving the region. But instead, it was Ada Wong who received the message. It was extreme happenstance that she did. Luis Serra wasn't aware that his old friend was dead and that Ada Wong was now receiving his messages. In the years following Raccoon City's destruction, Ada Wong continued to work for the mysterious organization, and she still reported directly to the one and only Albert Wesker. But now their attention would be turned to this remote part of Spain where a new bioweapon was being developed. The organization dispatched a soldier named Jack Krauser to the area so that he could integrate into Los Illuminados to gain intel. Jack Krauser had once served on a mission with USS Stratcom agent Leon Kennedy in South America back in the year 2002. There, Krauser had learned just how truly powerful the Umbrella bioorganic weapons were firsthand, and decided that he wished to pursue this path for himself. He was resentful of Kennedy's position in life, and he felt slighted that he was not a celebrated member of the armed forces, so he decided to become more than just human. After that particular mission, he faked his own death and sought out Albert Wesker, joining him in his mission to collect and understand the many umbrella viruses loose in the world. Now, Krauser has found himself amongst the Los Illuminados in Spain in 2004. While the prophet Osmond Sadler didn't especially like the walking ego machine that Jack Krauser was a useful man. Sadler gave him a sample of the Plaga parasite, but Krauser didn't deliver it to Wesker. Rather, he secretly pocketed the Plaga. Then, Sadler tasked him with possibly the most important part of his plan for world domination. Sadler ordered Jack Krauser to kidnap the daughter of the President of the United States, Ashley Graham. She was taken to a village near Ramon Salazar's castle and told that she would be returned to her father once a ransom was paid. In response to this crisis, Stratcom agent Leon Kennedy was dispatched to locate and rescue Ashley Graham, but with almost no intel on the actuality of the situation. As far as Leon Kennedy knew, this was a search and rescue operation, not a fight against bioorganic weapons. From the very start, troubles abound for Leon. Unbeknownst to him, the first local he encounters is infected, and he's forced to kill the man when he turns hostile. His ride and route out of the village are destroyed, and there are no friendly faces to be found here. Once the locals are made aware of his presence, they do not stop in their advances on his position. They do not behave like the T-virus infections of Raccoon City. This is a whole new creature that Leon Kennedy has no insight on how to approach. Deep into the settlement, Leon finds one Louis Serra. Apparently his ploy to get out of the area with the help of Ada Wong completely fell through and he was captured. Lucky for him that Leon came along when he did. Unlucky that he brought Father Bitores Mendez along with him. Father Mendez is a head figure within this community, a Catholic priest who was convinced by Osmond Sadler to act as the mouthpiece to the people of the region on his behalf. This was a major stepping stone in establishing Los Illuminados and bringing the populace into cooperation. And as a reward for his works, Father Mendez was given a specially engineered version of the Plaga that allowed him to retain control over his thought, but gave him all the physical benefits of the infection. Bringing down Leon Kennedy is quite simple, at least for now. In the custody of Osmond Sadler, a Plaga parasitic egg is injected into Kennedy. In time, it will mature enough to hatch and take over his body. He's dumped back in the village with Louis Serra, though Louis departs as soon as the opportunity presents. Leon fights his way to another part of the settlement where he once again encounters the father. But once again, while he's absolutely capable of raising his hand and causing grievous harm to Leon, he really doesn't. He warns him not to be a bother, acknowledges his Plaga infection, something Leon himself is still unaware of, and he deigns to leave Kennedy to his own devices with naught but a warning to essentially mind his manners. Later in the day, however, the Plaga begins to stir and awaken within him, and remember, the longer the Plaga is allowed to remain, the stronger it becomes within the host, the more dangerous it is to remove it. This sudden eruption of activity within him sends Leon into unconsciousness, where he will remain for a full 6 hours. A gauntlet of obstacles repeatedly halt Kennedy's progress, but eventually he does make it to a church where Ashley Graham is being held. During a brief showdown with Osmond Sadler, who is all too happy to grandstand and lay out the entirety of his plans for the president's daughter, Ashley recalls that she too has been infected with the Plaga. Though they don't quite realize the implications of it, it makes the search for answers to what it is and a cure for it absolutely mandatory. But Leon continues to show himself as a poorly mannered guest in these lands, finally drawing the ire and the violence of Father Bitores Mendez, who corners him in a run-down barn with lethal intent. He's had quite enough of Leon's behavior, and the Plaga within him is just primed and ready for such an event. But ultimately, Leon manages to prevail and bring down Father Mendez, retrieving his false eye in the process, a key of sorts that will allow Ashley and Leon passage from the village into the castle of Ramon Salazar, which, thankfully, lies not too far up ahead. Within the castle are hordes of Los Illuminados defending the grounds, but so too is Louis Serra, and he carried with him something that would stop the effects Leon and Ashley were experiencing due to the Plaga. But oh goodness, he lost it in his retreat from the Los Illuminados that were hunting him. He promises to seek it out and to bring it to them, as his guilt for their situation is beginning to weigh on him. Making their own way through the castle grounds, the duo come in contact with the sickly and Plaga-infected Ramon Salazar himself. He's a complete pawn of Osmond Sadler and makes it abundantly clear that he doesn't care about Leon. They need Ashley Graham for their own scheming, and Mr. Kennedy doesn't factor into anything other than a problem. This place is a nightmare of death traps for the two to survive. At times, they even have to do so separately. Ultimately, Leon loses custody of Ashley Graham, who was delivered to the clutches of Ramon Salazar for safekeeping. Leon must once again find her and rescue her. But oh my, look at who has crossed Leon's path once again. It's been 6 years since Raccoon City, and Ada Wong is still as questionably dressed as ever. She's had her own ventures through Salazar's castle, looking for Louis Serra and dodging her own obstacles, but it's led her here to playfully contend with her old pal for a moment. But ever the tease, she of course reveals very little about her affiliation with Albert Wesker and what she's doing here, instead choosing to tell him that she'll see him around, and peacefully leaves him to his own devices. While Louis is able to retrieve the treatment that Leon and Ashley would need for the Plaga, he is unable to deliver to Leon a sample of the perfected Plaga to take back to America to raise the alarm. his life is ended by Osmond Sadler, and the supposed prophet of Los Illuminados takes the Plaga with him. But before Louis passes, he gives Leon the drugs that he and Ashley will need to suppress the growth of the Plaga within them. It will buy them more time at least. At the end of the madness of this place, at the finale of this seemingly endless nonsensical horror show of a castle, is a delightful cherry on top. Ramon Salazar, in all his Plaga-infested glory, no longer an angry, sickly man contained within a vessel far too small. He's a sweeping amalgam of fleshly tentacles and a horrid maw, but perhaps this is a dreamy ascension for Ramon, as is the way of these things in the end. Leon is the victor in this arena. Ramon Salazar, the last of his family's name, is killed in his own home, one less obstacle in Leon's path to Osmond Sadler. The prophet ran off to an island fortress where for many years under the direction of Sadler, research into the Plaga took place. Ashley Graham was also taken here under guard someplace within the compound. Thankfully, it's Miss Ada Wong who arrives to assist Leon. So maybe she does like him after all. Albert Wesker rather wants Leon killed, but she convinced her boss to let him make trouble for Los Illuminados instead, to help make their jobs easier. She sees him to this island fortress and unceremoniously ditches him to go her own way to see to her own affairs, namely getting that Plaga sample that Osmond Sadler took from the dying Louis Serra. And this island is a whole new hellscape of trouble and frustration. Thankfully, Leon finds Ashley not too long after his arrival, and his only obstacle is reaching her. Which is kind of a funny statement, haha, isn't it, given what terrible experiments roam the halls of this once research facility. But eventually, Leon does find the young woman. Through the waste disposal, they find their way out and then up to where Osmond Sadler himself awaits. But it's been long enough that the small Plaga within the bodies of both Leon and Ashley respond to his command. Ashley, more so. Sadler takes the girl, once again, and though Leon cannot physically force himself to follow, he ensures that he can at least track her to end this sick game of chase. But first, the order comes down from Albert Wesker for Leon Kennedy to be killed. He has had quite enough. And Wesker does not give this order to Ada Wong. She's made far too many excuses for Leon and proven unwilling to kill the man. Instead, the order is given to Jack Krauser to carry out the murder. And Jack has a history with Leon. He quite dislikes the Stratcom agent. And Jack Krauser has infected himself with a Plaga parasite. He would have proven to be a tough fight before, but now he has a distinct advantage over the unsuspecting Leon Kennedy. And the hostility between the two is quite immediate. Some fancy knife work between the two sets the stage for what's inevitable between them, but Ada Wong intrudes to stop their conflict, at least for now. A long trek through winding tunnels, desolate ruins, and vicious Plaga eventually lead to that reunion. Now shirtless and wholly infected, Jack Krauser demands the attention of Kennedy in a battle of ultimate manliness, in a war of direct gunshots to the face and a unique, coy game of hide-and-go-seek. Only one may be the victor here. Some problems just cannot be worked out with smooches and cuddles, and once again, it is Leon Kennedy who wins the day. Jack Krauser was desperate for recognition and to be greater than he actually was, but in the end, that folly just landed him in a pile of rubble. Osmond Sadler now keeps Ashley Graham in slumber, under control, and Sadler has had repeated opportunities to stop Kennedy, but has consistently failed to actually seal the deal. Is that on purpose? Is it laziness, or perhaps ineptitude? Ada Wong once again intervenes in Leon's fight to give him a chance to get away with a now fully awake Ashley Graham. And once again, Osmond Sadler really whiffs it, and he fails to stop them, even though they're literally right there. They're right there, and we know he has tentacle arms under his robe. Okay, hold the sass, take a breath. Within the final stretch of the research facility, the duo finds the equipment set up to kill immature Plaga within a newly infected host. Removal of the parasite brings them one massive step closer to being home free. Now, it's the prophet who needs to be dealt with. Killing him will bring down the whole operation. Seems that he arrived just in time to save the girl, too. Leon finally gets to return and assist to Ada Wong. And now Osmond Sadler shows us his true face. And oh, it's the face that only a mother could love. Just look at that smoocher. I know, contain yourself. It's just so spicy, but we can't get caught up in the moment, can we? It's time for the final fight, the do or die. The fight carries on through repeated stabs to the eyes, but for old time's sake, Ada Wong does Leon one more solid favor. A rocket launcher sent with love, and it's more than enough to bring down this tyrant series wannabe, enough to finally end this Plaga madness. There is still the matter of that Plaga sample, however, and though Ada has spared Leon repeatedly in the past day, it might not be a good time to push that goodwill. She wants that sample, and he hands it over to her with little fight. In probable good practice, Ada initiates a bomb countdown to blow the entire facility sky high, but very kindly leaves Leon and Ashley the keys to her jet ski as she hightails it out of there on a fancy helicopter. I mean, there's more than enough room for 2 people on that thing, but I guess the jet ski is better than nothing. It gets them away in time to avoid the blast. I hope they didn't try to travel all the way across the ocean on that thing. In the aftermath of the Plaga, things went quiet for some time. Smaller, clandestine, more contained events propelled things forward, with bioterrorism attacks accenting the harrowing silence. But the company Tricell became more powerful and more dependent on the works of Albert Wesker. He was the power center for all of their bioweapon projects and discoveries, the man with the plan. In 2006, BSAA agents Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine discovered where Oswell E. Spencer, one of the founding fathers of Umbrella, was hiding out. The two infiltrated his vast estate, but rather than finding Spencer, they found a very jacked Albert Wesker. He's lethally empowered via his T-virus infection at this point. He arrived here before the BSAA team and personally took care of Oswell E. Spencer himself, giving the deranged man a rather poetic death that he deserved. The confrontation between the two parties ended with the capture of Jill Valentine, though Chris Redfield believed both Wesker and Jill to be dead at the finale. In actuality, Albert Wesker placed Jill Valentine into stasis in an Africa research facility, where she was infected with a strain of the progenitor virus. During the 1998 Raccoon City event, Jill Valentine had been vaccinated against the virus. Her body was able to fight off this new strain, making her all the more impervious to the progenitor virus variants. She was repeatedly infected with strains of the virus, and the antibodies her body created were used to engineer more stable versions of it. This was a paramount aid in the project developing a whole new progenitor variant, the Ouroboros virus. Ouroboros was less potent, less apt to kill its host, but still a vicious virus, a truly terrifying combination of characteristics that made it perhaps the most fearsome virus to date. Jill Valentine was eventually taken out of stasis and fitted with a device that continually administered a drug called P30, a concoction that would keep her free will suppressed and make her a weapon in the arsenal of Albert Wesker. Chris Redfield struggled with the loss of his BSAA partner. He didn't want to believe that she was truly dead, and he continued to search for answers, sometimes quite recklessly. He was a central figure in the BSAA, and in 2009, he received intel that led him to Africa to investigate an arms dealer named Ricardo Irving, who was suspected of having bioweapons. There, he met with a new partner, a BSAA agent named Sheva Alamar. Sheva would act as Chris's guide about the area and a combat companion, an invaluable knowledge source in the journey that was absolutely essential to the search. This region, within a country called Kijuju, was destabilized due to suspected bioterrorism, and unbeknownst to the BSAA, the locals where Chris Redfield was dispatched to were infected with something, a newer version of the Plagas that Leon Kennedy had encountered some 5 years prior, courtesy of the monsters at Tricell. On the ground, it is tense. The symptoms of something deeply wrong are on display. Chris and Sheva meet up with their equipment handler and a mission detailer named Renard Fisher, who orders them to meet with the BSAA Alpha team already on the ground. Fisher warns them of Ouroboros, that rumors of its doomsday potential are not incorrect, and that the arms dealer, Ricardo Irving, is the only lead on the project. In the quiet in the streets, it does not last long. Locals already infected with the Plagas are actively spreading the parasite into others by force. Once Sheva and Chris come across that first sign of trouble, of a Plagas being implanted into a victim, the dam breaks wide open. Just as Leon Kennedy faced once upon a time in Spain, Chris and Sheva must now combat hordes of descending Plagas-infected victims and fight their way through to the Alpha Team. Renard Fisher is publicly executed once the mayhem begins. The Alpha Team begins to take losses before reaching the rendezvous point, ultimately being wiped out. And Chris and Sheva are barely surviving the waves of infected blocking their path, but another BSAA team makes contact with them at the height of a violent confrontation, the Delta Team, led by a man named Josh Stone, the soldier that trained Sheva, but more akin to a brother than a commanding officer. He hands off intel related to the locations of the arm dealer Ricardo Irving and gives Chris Redfield a PDA with footage of a still living Jill Valentine on it. Further insight is obtained here as to what happened to the locals and how it relates to the Plaga. Whoever released the Plaga into the populace knew that the BSAA would be entering the area, and the terror these people were experiencing was all for the sake of obtaining data on the Plaga's effectiveness as a weapon against trained soldiers, very akin to what took place in 1998 at the Spencer Mansion in the Arklay Mountains. It's a long trek, but eventually Sheva and Chris do track down the arms dealer Ricardo Irving, and he is a righteous piece of shrill work. The only reason he makes it out of the confrontation is because a Wesker-controlled Jill Valentine interrupts the showdown and retrieves the cackling idiot. Documents left in Irving's wake point to an oil field in some far-off marshlands where more activity is taking place. It's their new target, and thankfully they won't have to travel the bulk of the distance on foot. A Delta Team member arrives with a transport they will use to fight their way across the plains of the region. And at nightfall, more fiendish monsters and abominations rear their ugly heads, ghoulish monstrosities that have felled parts of the Delta Team, thinning the allies that Chris and Sheva have to call upon in the area. Sheva's senses tell her that this situation has become far too widespread and lethal for the BSAA forces that are still remaining. It's time to retreat and acknowledge that this mission is FUBAR. She's certainly correct, but when Chris explains that his old partner, Jill Valentine, could be here and could possibly be recovered, Sheva doesn't hesitate in following him into the fray. The flooded plains of this region mark the beginning of the Indipaya territory, and they too have been subjected to a type of plagas. Having been conned and coerced into accepting the parasite, much of the tribe has been wiped out at this point. Those that Chris and Sheva do come across are under Plaga control and are devastatingly hostile to outsiders. The Delta Team captain, Josh Stone, is able to further direct Chris and Sheva to where Ricardo Irving was heading, a nearby Tricell-owned dock where a boat awaits him for pickup. The walking turd dumpling of an irritation hightails it from the scene, even though Chris very clearly yelled at him to wait. The docks are rigged to explode, as all docks typically are. But Delta Captain Josh Stone was able to point out a set of boats nearby to Chris because we all know Chris has very poor eyesight and refuses to wear his glasses. But before Chris and Sheva are able to reach Irving's boat, Jill Valentine confronts the sniveling man, demanding to know what he plans on doing about his pursuers, or is he just going to let them follow him about everywhere? With no convincing answer beyond "I'll handle it," Jill presents Irving with a gift of sorts. From Excelligione, a way to handle them, his own Plagas injection. But it seems that Excella didn't send the good stuff for Ricardo Irving. It's an immediate and volatile transformation into something not meant to be invulnerable. Even in this form, Ricardo Irving is not enough to stop the BSAA. And to seal the deal on the stupidity of the Chodeman, he monologues precisely where Chris and Sheva need to go next and that they're on the right path for tracking down Ouroboros. He really sticks it to them in his death throes by revealing valuable information, as all good villains do. The cave that Irving directed them towards was previously traversed by Jill Valentine and leads into the heart of ancient Indipaya territory. There are traps, threats, confrontation, but deeper into the cave system, it's finally found. The progenitor flower in its native habitat, the source of Umbrella's many viruses were long ago Brandon Bailey and James Marcus studied. Now left partially derelict, covered in echoes and monsters of the past in the sanctum of the old facility, where now Tricell is starting to play under the direction of Albert Wesker. Just beyond the Outlier Research Facility is another of Tricell's great evils, a massive storage chamber lined with hundreds of test victims in stasis, where Jill Valentine was too once held. and where a great beast lurks to seek out these intruders, another monstrous Plaga creation acts as a guard dog. But even this Plaga type lacks the survivability to be an unstoppable weapon. It is able to be sent back into the shadows of the facility by the BSAA agents. But the relief of the victory is short-lived when the capsule supposedly containing Jill Valentine is brought out, completely empty. And Equalized decides to make her presence known, rather brazenly telling them that they should leave. Though the whole point of the call is rather unclear and only really cements the guilt of Tricell as part of the global pharmaceutical consortium. But who am I to question the logic of such things? I'm sure that there was really a point to it all. And soon after, Chris's radio picks up Excella having a conversation with Albert Wesker. 10 out of 10, Mrs. Gione, and now Chris knows that Albert Wesker is also still alive. Excella quickly plays her next hand, cornering Sheva and Chris into a room with a live display of what Ouroboros is. This isn't a new weapon to fuel global bioterrorism. It's not a tool of profit. Rather, it's the culmination of Albert Wesker's lifelong search for something greater than Oswell E. Spencer was ever able to create. The answer to what would spur on the next stage in human evolution to those that were compatible with the Ouroboros virus. It's what would make mankind more like himself. Equalized was all too happy to aid in this endeavor with the hopes of standing beside him to rule over this new changed world. But now is a demonstration of just how dangerous even a failed Ouroboros infection can be. It takes repeated, direct firepower and explosives just to stop this one new failed infection. But it's pure insight into how desperate the fight against the Ouroboros is going to have to be. After this bout, and not far away, Excella greets Chris and Sheva with no barrier between them, though in the protective presence of the drugged and controlled Jill Valentine, who will not allow anything to happen to Excella. And finally, Albert Wesker is here as well, in all his leather daddy glory, but he doesn't waste a lot of time monologuing his ghoulish plans for Ouroboros. This seems like rather a fun opportunity for Wesker, a chance to stretch his legs, a supposed fair fight 2 on 2, for at least a while, for as long as he has to tarry about with his old pal, about 7 minutes. But while Wesker does have to eventually step out and take a phone call to conduct his business, he graciously leaves behind Jill Valentine to entertain the duo. Her resistance to this, however, even now, is a catalyst to Wesker deciding that it was probably better to amp up the drug dosing from the device on her chest and just let her suffer the process out in the presence of her old BSAA partner. Whatever happens, happens. It's not really of consequence to Albert Wesker anymore. But Sheva focuses the confusion of all of this into getting the thing off of Jill, ripping it out if need be, trying to save her if at all possible. Perhaps she need not die as Albert Wesker perhaps deemed her fate. And that device is so firmly planted into Jill Valentine that it's almost enraging how much pulling and grappling it takes to get it to detach, which I guess is the point. It's not meant to come off. Fair enough. Jill's poor sternum, though. She will survive this, but her survival doesn't mean anything if Ouroboros is released. Her well-being at this point is not the focus of what Chris and Sheva should be pursuing. It's Albert Wesker who must be stopped now. In this moment, he is the greatest single threat to the continuation of mankind, and he's boarding a ship with Equalized at his side. This is the beginning of the final pursuit. Everything depends on this night. The ship is crawling with Plaga-infested monstrosities. Reaching Wesker and Excella is a slow, dangerous process. And they actually find Excella alone, no one to defend her, retrieving a case of something marked PG67AW. It's an antigen created from the progenitor virus to keep the T-virus infection in Albert Wesker under control. It's a very precise formula and dosing. Sure, it would be a shame if Excella dropped a case of it and left a few doses of it in the custody of Sheva, wouldn't it? Would also be a shame if Excella got dosed with the Ouroboros by Wesker, only, oh dear, to be incompatible with it. It appears that in this new world she so desired to create, Excella herself would not be deemed worthy to be a part of it. The Ouroboros virus changes her into something monstrous and unsightly that feeds off the corpses on the deck and thrashes through the ship to reach the fleeing agents. The threat she now presents clearly cannot be ignored. The ship is going down, and whatever Excella has become is not going to just let them leave. It takes direct shots from a satellite laser weapon to end the beast. Though, honestly, being real, I bet a rocket launcher could have done that in one shot. Where the hell is Ada Wong when you need her? Albert Wesker is preparing to depart, but the man is nigh invincible. They've already faced off against him once. As Wesker is right now, he physically cannot be stopped. But Miss Jill Valentine happens to know a thing or two about Wesker, and she knows that he needs regular injections of that PG-67 serum to maintain stability of the virus within him. Too much could act as a poison in his system and create some sort of vulnerability. Thankfully, Excellagione had delivered extra doses to them before her unfortunate ascension into Super Blob Monster. And now, biggest obstacle in that plan is, well, Wesker is a slippery ninja flippy leather daddy, and he's hard to pin down, and rocket launchers are only mildly effective in slowing him. But through the power of explosives, teamwork, and friendship, Chris and Sheva managed to halt Wesker long enough to give him an extra dose of PG-67 and start the process of truly stopping this deranged man. Even while destabilizing, Wesker is far from defeated and will not concede anything so long as he can still function. The plan is to launch Ouroboros into the atmosphere, but he doesn't make it off the tanker without Chris and Sheva making it on board his plane. He's already turning more feral, more enraged and uncontrolled. Wesker just can't contain his abject anger and engages the two in the freight area of the ascending weapon. In this conflict, the cargo doors are opened and the plane begins to depressurize. All he had to do was wait 5 minutes to launch Ouroboros, but Wesker was playing a hand in completely undoing his own work. And then the plane is brought down into a goddamned volcano. Yeah, sure. Okay, you know what? Yeah, fuck it, let's do this. Wesker takes the Ouroboros virus unto himself, turning him into something altogether new, vile and highly interested in the death of Chris Redfield. It's minutes of gunfire, fleeing, explosives, boulder punching, and obstacle dodging, all just to survive against this tyrant-akin humanoid that refuses to lay down and die. It's the destabilization of the volcano's interior, the rocks that they walk on, that is required to halt his onslaught. Though even a lava bath is questionable in its effectiveness. Delta Captain Josh Stone and Jill Valentine arrive for extraction, and Wesker refuses to allow this to take place. It takes double rocket launcher action into a lava bath to hopefully kill Albert Wesker. And with his demise, so too comes the end of Ouroboros. The Pandora's box of bioterrorism did not close with the death of Albert Wesker in 2009. The terrible deeds of Oswell E. Spencer begot a legacy of clandestine groups and organizations that benefited from war and confusion. Particularly in America, troubles continued to brew in the aftermath of Umbrella, but always from the shadows. An influential man named Derek Simmons, born of an ultra-powerful bloodline and the head of an organization called The Family, saw power to be gained in the void left by the pharmaceutical giant. Simmons held positions of power within the government over the years and played a major role in Raccoon City's destruction in 1998. That is, if you believe the retcons of legend. According to these tales, Ada Wong had been in the city under his order. He was obsessively enamored with her, and when she ditched him for greater opportunities, he was unwilling to abandon his obsession with her. He harbored those thoughts for years. Simmons' position of power within the family and within the U.S. government gave him direct access to little Sherry Birkin as she grew up. He even acted as her legal guardian. Samples would be taken from the girl over the years. Her blood contained traces of the G virus. Under his order, according to the retcons of fable, that is, a whole new line of research into the G virus, the T virus, and the T Veronica virus began. A young woman named Carla Rodamez led the effort, trying to create for Derek Simmons a new progenitor virus. Soon into her employment, Carla Rodamez became infatuated with the man. The genius young woman quickly developed a virus prototype, calling it the chrysalid virus, or the C virus. In an effort to gain his attention, Carla steered her research in the direction of modified cloning. Using the unique malleable properties of the C virus, the genetic makeup of a subject could be rewritten. Derek Simmons wanted his own Ada Wong, so that is where the project was redirected towards, with unlimited resources provided by the family. Using Ada Wong's genetics as a blueprint, thousands of people were used as test subjects over the course of a decade, creating ghastly monstrosities and beasts. None were genetically similar enough to the original Ada Wong to be a successful copy. In the end, by happenstance, it was Carla Radames herself who held the most potential as a genetic copy of Ada Wong. And when Derek Simmons discovered this, he put immense pressure on Carla to comply as a test subject. Wanting to please Simmons, she agreed. Sometime before the year 2010, Carla Radames became the clone of Ada Wong, with all of her personality and intelligence to boot. The only difference between the original Ada and this clone was that the copy was completely enamored with Derek Simmons. She served as a valued enforcer and a planner in his shady dealings, a partner. But over time, the old Carla began to surface, and she became furious over what Simmons had done to her. After the death of Albert Wesker in 2009, and after the completion of the Ada Wong cloning project, the now young woman, Sherry Birkin, became a government agent under the direct command of her once legal guardian, Derek Simmons. Sherry was normal for the most part. The G-virus had remained suppressed in her body, but she had regenerative healing abilities and a drive to ensure that what happened in Raccoon City when she was a girl was never allowed to happen again. But in 2012, the family and the U.S. government became aware of an offspring of Albert Wesker. Seems that Wesker liked to tank and spank too. He had a son that he was never made aware of. Jake Mueller was his name, and it was hypothesized that he naturally produced antibodies that could fight against the progenitor viruses, including the C virus. The U.S. government wanted him so that these antibodies could be used in vaccine research. The family wanted him to further their research into the C virus. In December of 2012, Sherry Birkin was dispatched to Edonia, where Jake lived and fought alongside the Edonia Liberation Army as a mercenary for hire. Before she reached Jake, the Ada Wong clone, now more akin to her original self, Carla Radames, arrived in Edonia and gave all of Jake's unit doses of the C virus, telling them that they were nutrient injections instead. Already, much of the Edonia Liberation Army was infected with this new virus and held in secret massive ultraviolent C virus BOWs. Jake did his injection and was not impacted by the virus, confirming that he was indeed immune to the progenitor variants. The rest of his unit was not so lucky. Those who were infected began to tear others apart, just like so many others in the Liberation Army who were already infected. And all this in the middle of a combat zone. Sherry Birkin did eventually make contact with Jake Mueller, and he agreed to return to America so long as he got a payout of $50 million for doing so. Yeah, sure, good luck with that, bud. Meanwhile, another story is getting underway, that of Chris Redfield, who's also in Edonia, fighting against the bioorganic weapons now spreading through the Edonia Liberation Army. In the years since his venture into Africa with Sheva Alamar, the now Special Ops Captain of the BSAA has made the acquaintance of Leon Kennedy and developed a friendship with the U.S. agent. Year after year, Chris faced deployment to combat the fires of bioterrorism, gradually becoming more and more numb to the terrors that it brought. Edonia was another deployment to handle BOWs sprouting up, though it was especially bad here. The C virus-infected soldiers are intelligent and capable of weaponized combat. They're not mindless zombie hordes running into gunfire. To make matters even worse, 2 of the Edonia Liberation Army's massive bioorganic weapons were deployed into the zone. During the mission, Chris meets Sherry Birkin and Jake Mueller, with BSAA soldier and Redfield's right-hand man Piers Nivens recognizing him as a wanted insurgent. They all fight together in the city against encroaching C virus-infected soldiers and the massive BOWs thrashing about the city, after which Sherry asks of Chris to allow her to take custody of Jake Mueller so that she can see him escorted back to the United States, and Chris honors her request. His sister, Claire Redfield, has told him quite a bit about Sherry Birkin, and he will extend to her professional respect by not interfering with her mission. The BSAA has other things to worry about anyways, namely investigating and combating this BOW outbreak. In the City Hall building, the BSAA team meets the Ada Wong clone, Carla Radames, though she identifies herself as Ada Wong. At this point, Carla is in full sabotage revenge mode against Derek Simmons and submits to Redfield the name Neo Umbrella, the organization supplying the rebels with their bioweapons and resources fueling the war. She's not lying either. She's just omitting that she herself is the one behind Neo Umbrella as a tactic to ruin Derek Simmons and bring chaos into the world. Introducing Chris Redfield and the BSAA into the equation would be advantageous. She can manipulate them all the way back to Derek Simmons himself and really smoke the man out of the shadows. They can do her dirty work for her. The foundation is already set. This supposed Ada Wong accompanies the group for a short time. It's far too dangerous even for her to try to make it through the zone alone. The C virus infections are far too widespread and extremely dangerous. And as a thanks for this escort, Carla traps part of the BSAA team and infects them with the C virus. Only Redfield and Pierce are spared the attack, and that is only by pure luck. They have to watch as the men that they fought alongside all this time are turned into C-virus beasts, monsters that Redfield just does not have the heart to open fire upon. Pierce is able to pull Redfield out and reach extraction, but this is a loss to the hardened heart of Chris Redfield that he won't be able to just shake off. More troubles abound for Sherry and Jake as well. The chopper carrying them out of Adonia is brought down in the mountains, forcing them to make their way out on foot. It's a long trek over the course of a bitterly cold night, but at daybreak they do find civilization. They also find, Carla, waiting for them at the base of the mountain. It was this Neo Umbrella organization that brought them down. Carla has beaten both the family and the U.S. government in securing custody of Jake Mueller and his magical antibody blood. It's her pleasure to inform Jake of his father's identity and the reason for his soon-to-be imprisonment. His blood could either save the world in the right hands or ruin it in the wrong. About 6 months later, at the end of June in 2013, U.S. President Adam Benford informed Derek Simmons, who publicly served as the administration's national security advisor, of his intention to disclose to the world the U.S. government's involvement with Umbrella Pharmaceuticals and with the destruction of Raccoon City in 1998. It was an attempt at transparency, at mending bridges between foreign powers, and a strengthening of alliances in the ongoing war on bioterrorism. Simmons was extremely against this, of course, because he had a hand in the destruction of the city, and because he too is secretly engaged in the study of old Umbrella viruses. He would do anything to keep it a secret, even plot the assassination of a U.S. president. Simmons ordered that a troubled CIA agent named Helena Harper be brought into the Secret Service. She was on the brink of being fired for repeated instances of professional misconduct, making her an easy and malleable target. Helena Harper and her sister were kidnapped by the family, and under threat of murdering her sister, Helena agreed to participate in a plot to kill the president, to cause a distraction that would lead to a moment of vulnerability for the president. The day of the announcement at Ivy University, President Benford informed the now head figure within the Division of Security Operations, Leon Kennedy, of his intention to disclose. Kennedy had, over the years, become a trusted friend of the president, more than just a DSO agent on the payroll. As preparations were made for the speech to commence, Helena Harper claimed that an assassin was intending to attack the president, causing on-site security to search the grounds, therefore lessening security around the president himself. Simultaneously, Derek Simmons ordered C-virus-infected creatures be loosed in the building, and very quickly infections began to spread. Helena regretted her involvement and tried to call forces back to the president's side to protect him, but it was far too late. The damage was done. President Benford was infected with the C virus, and a devastated Leon Kennedy was forced to put him down. Along with the guilt-racked Helena Harper, Kennedy makes it out of the university. She is very insistent that they venture to Tall Oaks Cathedral, but refuses to explain why. The C virus is now spreading through the area like wildfire. Intent on searching out who was responsible for this attack, Leon works with Helena Harper and makes it through the city, then eventually under it by way of the Tall Oaks Cathedral, where labs and holding areas belonging to the family lay. Helena becomes more frantic the deeper they go, extremely worried about the well-being of her sister. But she is still unwilling to tell Leon all she knows of Derek Simmons and her own involvement with the death of the president. The two discover a videotape labeled "Happy Birthday, Ada Wong." Leon has quite a history with Ms. Wong. Of course, this is of interest to him. The tape is the emergence of Carla Radames, emerging from her chrysalis as the clone of Ada Wong, though there's no context as to what's going on here. It really just looks like a butt-naked Ada Wong jumping out of a cursed birthday cake. Helena's sister is still here, which is initially a relief for the frantic agent, but Simmons never intended to uphold his end of the bargain with Helena. Her cooperation didn't mean anything. She and her sister were never meant to survive the night. Helena's sister was infected with the C virus, and Helena's denial of the situation isn't going to change that fact. Something that the real Ada Wong acknowledges and steps in to assist with. This woman must be killed. But oh, Ada Wong, just where the heck did you come from? Well, Derek Simmons, for some reason, created a circumstance to inform Ada Wong all about Jake Mueller and Sherry Birkin and their plans to halt the creation of a vaccine. And then Carla Radames herself explains how Simmons had a clone of Ada and she was going to take the blame for the fallout of the C virus. And it's all just so... oh my gosh. Anyways, the real Ada is here to do her own investigation. Running into Leon was just a nice little surprise. The temporary trio kill Helena's sister by dropping the nigh unkillable C virus BOW a few feet and then they call it good, after which Helena finally spills the beans on who she is and what she's done. But all of this is just too much drama for Ada Wong, and she's forced to depart from the whole affair. She has her own issues to handle and zero time to finish her sentences. Simmons himself makes contact with the duo, as he seems to be fond of playing his hand out to people who could present as opposition to his plans. Kennedy and Harper are named as suspects in the murder of the president, making their return to the DSO impossible. They're on their own now, and partners, whether they like it or not. Their route out from underneath the city is long and convoluted, but at dawn, they're at least able to greet the rising sun mostly intact. The city of Tall Oaks will not be so lucky. The area is being sterilized, just like Raccoon City 15 years prior. All evidence of what took place gone with it. Leon's old pal and work partner, Ingrid Hannigan, is able to make contact after the Simmons debacle and informs Leon of another C virus attack taking place in China, where Derek Simmons is en route via a private jet. Though she doesn't have enough insight to connect everything back to him, Hannigan sees through the scheme being crafted by the National Security Advisor. Hannigan files paperwork falsifying Leon and Helena's deaths to give them enough breathing room to leave the country. Their next stop is China. Chris Redfield struggled immensely after the Edonia incident and the loss of his men. He snuck away from hospital after the mission and decided to go missing. By the time the president was killed in June of 2013 back in America, Chris Redfield had become a drunken shadow of his former self. His life in the BSAA had caught up with him, and to cope with all of it, he just drank himself into a stupor and blocked it all out. But Piers Nivens spent those 6 months searching for his old BSAA captain. The C virus had reappeared in China and there was work to be done. Just the same as Leon Kennedy and Helena Harper, the BSAA departed for China. Jake Mueller and Sherry Birkin spent those 6 months between December and June in custody of Neo Umbrella within China. Jake was used as an antibody source to further enhance the C virus during that time. It was an opportune moment of laxness on behalf of his guards that gave Jake the chance to shoot his way out of confinement and find a miraculous switch that unlocked every door in the facility, making it possible for Sherry Birkin to also make her escape. The two make contact and dress to leave, giving Jake the opportunity to really put his poor attitude on display in regards to his father's identity, believing that the foul nature of Albert Wesker was passed on to him. But he's saying this to the daughter of William and Annette Birkin, the minds behind the horrific G virus, and she very easily puts him in his place and tells him to take responsibility for his own actions. His father had nothing to do with it. It seems that Wesker Jr. has a bit of a daddy issue and a loathing towards the man that he never knew. Jake and Sherry, Leon and Helena, and Chris and Piers are now all parties soon to collide in the city called Weiyi. Leon and Helena are able to board a transport to China, but an unfortunate C virus outbreak takes place on the plane, once in Chinese airspace, Fortunately, the plane just so happens to land in the exact city they need to be, taking them right over the head of Ada Wong and about 10 feet away from Jake and Sherry, who are en route to meet with the evil Derek Simmons. Wow, talk about coincidences! Sherry is unaware that her superior and former legal guardian is the driving force behind the C virus and is righteously confused when Leon names him as their target. But Leon saved Sherry's life back in Raccoon City. They're longtime friends and she trusts him. Leon's words are enough to make her question her mission. A bargain bin C-virus tyrant halts the two teams' discussion for a while, and then ends up splitting them apart. But before leaving, Sherry informs Leon of exactly where Simmons is at. Putting out his own series of fires jogs the memory of Chris Redfield eventually. He remembers the name and the face of the supposed Ada Wong that infected and killed his men 6 months prior in Adonia, and he vows to search the woman out, not knowing that she is actually Carla Radamez. As they go, the BSAA saves hostages held by Neo Umbrella, are under constant gunfire, and have to struggle through every corridor they trek down. Even when Chris spots the long MIA Sherry Birkin and Jake Mueller, he makes the call that their BOW elimination is more important than making contact with them, which means finding Ada Wong is more important. As more of the BSAA team starts to die in combat, Chris becomes more unwilling to waver in the mission or to even be flexible. Everything is an order that must be followed, and eventually they do find the woman from 6 years prior, the fake Ada Wong. And as if to really kick in the knife into the old wound of Redfield's loss, her presence lasts as long as it takes to infect one of his men with the C virus. This time, Chris does act to put down what is left of his old teammate alongside Piers. The two men have a spat after the fact, arguing intentions and using harsh words to prove their points. But in the end, both of them decide to chase down this woman. Leon and Helena also encountered this faux Ada as they drew closer to where Derek Simmons is hiding out, chasing her through a Neo Umbrella warehouse full of weapons and booby traps. Leon intends to bring this Ada Wong into custody to answer for what she is doing here. Because if his own personal experience with Ada has taught him anything, she's extremely easy to take into police custody, isn't she, young man? But Chris Redfield has nearly beat him to this goal, and Chris has no intention of extracting information. He seems rather ready to shoot the woman all to hell. Can't say I blame him, but the Twitter-pated altruism of Leon Kennedy and the blind rage of Chris Redfield bring the two friends into conflict with one another, neither willing to let the other have their way in this regard. Of course, giving the clone ample opportunity to flee the area. In the end, Leon agrees that they will pursue Derek Simmons and Chris will pursue the supposed Ada Wong, with the faith that Chris won't kill the woman on sight, but take her into custody instead. The real Ada Wong has been not too far away from the various groups this whole time in China, finding leads on what's been taking place in Simon's and Carla's camps and occasionally offering assistance to others from the shadows. Like Chris Redfield, her primary goal is this copy, Carla, but surprisingly, Redfield and Pierce managed to beat Ada Wong to their target. Carla is aboard a cargo ship full of military vehicles and weaponry. She intends to launch missiles carrying airborne C virus into population centers, thus ensuring that containment would be impossible. What an absolutely startling revelation that absolutely nobody could have seen coming. You know what else no one saw coming? A helicopter soundlessly appearing out of nowhere like a kitten. Presumably a member of the family is acting on behalf of Derek Simmons, and Carla is delivered a fatal shot to the chest from the sniper. So, Chris got his way, but he wasn't the one that shot her. All is well that ends well, right? Well, no. There's still the issue of those missiles. They're not on this cargo ship, but they are nearby and have missiles pointed directly towards mainland China. The real Ada Wong has a moment of words with the dying Carla Radamez, bemoaning that Carla just went too far. If she had kept this just about ruining Simmons, then the two could have worked together perhaps. Carla doesn't seem to give a hell about any of this anymore, though. She's injected herself with a dose of the C virus, turning her into a running sludge monster spreading throughout the ship, a surging bag of Izits that Ada repeatedly has to pop to make it out safely. Carla is not an issue she cares to address. She's going after Simmons herself now. The BSAA can handle whatever is left over. Meanwhile, back in the city, Leon and Sherry Birkin make contact once more, albeit briefly. And during a confrontation with Derek Simmons, no less, seems the head of the family has no real love for the girl that he once raised. He wants her and Jake Mueller taken into custody, the safeguarding of Jake being the ultimate goal. Perfectly willing to flip on Simmons, Sherry gives Leon information as to why exactly Jake is such a valuable asset, so that even if she fails to deliver him to the U.S. government, knowledge of who and what he is might reach the proper authorities. The two parties split up amongst the gunfire, with Leon and Helena boarding a train to the nearby city of Tachi, occupied by Simmons and his men, and Sherry completing her escort of Jake Mueller to the extraction point. Too bad they missed the spectacle of Derek Simmons getting infected with the C virus by a random Neo-Umbrella goon that no one in his security detail saw coming. Right to the neck. I wonder what's going to happen to Derek Simmons now. Well, apparently Simmons likes to take his train rides on top of the train. I can't say I blame him. The dosing that he got before boarding was a special batch, extra potent, using the blood of Jake Mueller to enhance the formula, strong enough to burn away his shirt and turn him into a rampaging bioorganic weapon. The real question here being, how did his pants stay intact? Or are butts just that much of a sin? Helena and Leon keep up with the mutated Simmons for a while, but eventually the speeding train is completely derailed over a body of water. While Leon and Helena are able to swim their way out, Simmons is now missing in the city of Tachi. Sherry and Jake don't make it very far at all. Soon after departing from Leon and Helena, they're captured by Neo-Umbrella once again, and this time, they awaken in a massive underwater facility in the ocean large enough to rival that of Rapture. Supposedly an underwater oil field on paper, but Neo-Umbrella evil facility of bad deeds and bioweapons in actuality. Back on the surface, Redfield and Pierce are able to commandeer a jet to attack that missile carrier, but they are not in time to stop the launch of one of the missiles, en route for the nearby city of Tachi, where Leon Kennedy and Helena Harper are now. Chris is able to warn Leon Kennedy moments before the strike, but there's no chance in hell the city can be spared from the C virus. After making contact with the true Ada Wong, Leon and Helena chase down Derek Simmons in the rapidly declining and ruined city. And calling him hard to kill would certainly be a statement. I'm starting to think that even a rocket launcher wouldn't stand a chance against this level of power creep the viruses are presenting. Simmons is stopped, but we know how these things go, right? And don't you know, Leon? It's never quite as simple as round 1 KO, but our boy Leon has got other things on his mind, namely the real Ada Wong. He's got those Twitter-pated eyes of a smitten man. They follow her copter up to the roof of a skyscraper, or at least that's their intent. Simmons is quite unfinished with his rampage and interrupts their ascent. Ada decides to join the fray in this second phase, assisting Helena and Leon in combating Simmons atop a sky bridge that really can take a beating like a true champion. But Miss Wong has places to be, and at the conclusion of this stage, she gracefully makes her exit and turns her attention towards something that has been on her mind. Though she very sweetly lets Leon know that she left him a little gift on the roof, something he is certainly going to need as this fight with Simmons is far from over. He undergoes one final mutation into something buzzworthy, a giant C virus fly. And what was the gift Ada left for them? Well, a helicopter and a rocket launcher, so maybe they are still effective at dealing with these situations. I mean, the power of Thor wasn't enough to kill it, but we have traditions to keep with here, folks. A direct shot from the rocket launcher sends the human form of Derek Simmons plunging down the length of the massive building to be impaled on a monument. This is finally the true end of Simmons and the conclusion of Leon and Helena's part in this tale. They now can depart from the city. But the same cannot be said for Piers, Chris, Jake, and Sherry. Chris and Piers went after the captured Jake and Sherry to the supposed underwater oil field. The two groups do eventually find one another after extensive fights against BOWs all over the station. Everything is fine. No yelling ensues about Albert Wesker. No one discharges a firearm right next to the ear of Chris Redfield, certainly not deafening the man. And Jake is now best buds with Chris Redfield because he knows how to handle his emotions well. And he's understanding and he's empathetic and he's a great young man. Moving on. A massive BOW is held within the facility, a shockingly large one to boot. Chris sends Jake and Sherry out of the fight when the chance presents, acknowledging that Jake Mueller is what will save this world from the C-virus. He has to make it out of this place. Piers and Chris will remain behind to handle the BOW. Sherry and Jake struggle through the facility, encountering the bargain bin C-virus tyrant deployed to hunt down Jake and retrieve him for Neo Umbrella. Their fight is a long, drawn-out one, much the same as the fight Chris and Piers are engaged in. Their BOW is just unstoppable, and in this case, even just fleeing from it is impossible. Chris and Piers hold out against the BOW for as long as possible. They fight valiantly, but it wears them down. Piers is impaled during the combat, and Chris is in the process of being crushed when the younger BSAA agent makes the decision to inject himself with a powerful dose of the C-virus that Carla created. In his last-ditch attempt at stopping the creature, and it is just barely enough to turn the tide, to give Chris the opening he needs to cut the heart out of the thing. If Piers hadn't done this, they both would have died in that room. The destruction of the facility is imminent. While the mutating Piers and Chris Redfield struggle to reach an escape pod, so too do Sherry and Jake struggle in their fight against the bargain bin tyrant. Their best bet is to just find a way out and allow the destruction taking place to kill it. With the power of friendship and two hands holding one gun, they escape the monster as the crumbling oil field ignites. Piers Nivens, though, understands that he does not have much longer. Though his captain insists that everything is going to be okay, and they're going to make it out alive. At the escape pods, Piers sends Chris away alone. Chris Redfield had planned to retire after this mission, to hand off his position of leadership within the BSAA to Piers Nivens, but instead, his goodbye to the young soldier will come during his death. Piers guarantees Chris's safety by attacking the raging BOW one final time, keeping it at the underwater station and sealing its fate when the oil field ignites and takes everything down with it. Ada Wong's final act in this particular tale was destroying what remained of Carla Radama's work when she found her lab. Within, another C-virus monstrosity was readying itself to hatch, but Ada had quite enough of this horror. She left the room in flame, refusing to allow any of it to see the light of day. No one would know about this. It could all just rot here. Jake Mueller's blood was created to use a vaccine for the C-virus, eventually snuffing out the threat of infection on a global scale. He and Sherry Birkin parted ways, but they kept in contact as life took them in separate directions. While he still lived as a mercenary of sorts, he instead devoted his energies to being a bit more of a positive force in the world, rather than a cheap gun for hire. He strove to be different, better than his father. Leon Kennedy and Helena Harper were cleared of being involved in the president's murder. Hannigan and Leon did quite a favor to Helena in concealing what she did that night. They would both continue their work in the Division of Security Operations as federal agents fighting against and investigating bioterrorism. Chris Redfield remained with the BSAA after the events in China, becoming as hard-hearted and determined as ever to continue his fight. And there were more outbreaks to come, more horrors to face and viruses to snuff out. But in the year 2017, Chris received a request for cooperation from an organization that he quite distrusted. This would take him to Dulvey, Louisiana, where the terror of a small family would be but a symptom of the things to come. There's another series of events and characters that we must now gift our attention. We leave behind the terrible deeds of Oswell E. Spencer, of James Marcus, of Albert Wesker. Let's return to where it started, Miranda. While Umbrella and Tricell played their games of terror through creation, there was another calamitous storyline playing out in the background. To understand this particular chain of events, we have to go back some time. In the year 2000, 2 years after the destruction of Raccoon City, Mother Miranda began to work with a furtive syndicate called the Connections. And what makes the Connections so interesting is that it was founded by Brandon Bailey. Do you remember him? He was the assistant to James Marcus in Africa, a head figure in the study of the progenitor virus, and an integral part in the creation of the original T-virus. After the assassination of James Marcus, Brandon Bailey, he just vanished, just to be mentioned in name only some years later as the founder of the Connections. they would help Miranda in her research, provide additional minds and manpower into the situation, even employ a private military contractor called the HCF to do their dirty work. The connections were given samples of Miranda's mold and of her long-dead daughter's DNA, with the agreement that both would be used in aiding in the resurrection of her. During the wild years of her once pupil, Oswell Spencer, and then the Umbrella Corporation, Miranda walked her own solitary path in the isolation of her village, making strides in the creation of mold-infected subjects, but never truly succeeding in creating that perfect vessel to hold her daughter. But in the hands of the experts at the Connections, brand new types of bioweapons slowly went into testing.
What makes this project markedly different from conventional weapons is its ability to turn enemy combatants into allies, converting hostile elements into willing servants. Since this effectively eliminates the cost of not only POW handling, but combat itself, it's no wonder we had the cell and even the chomping at the bit to get on board. The project would never have existed were it not for the discovery of the remarkably progressed vicariant evolution fungus that we commonly term the mutamycete. The fabrication for each bioweapon was to introduce the mutamycete genome into a pre-stage 4 human embryo and perform cultivation in a controlled environment over a period of 38 to 40 weeks.
The first line, the A-type, it performed poorly in a practical setting.
Each iteration of the candidate specimens was judged based on usability.
And each new version of the molded type was improved upon. And with each new series came a necrotoxin that could kill it because a backup plan is paramount in this wholly warped world. Between the year 2000 and 2014, there were 5 types of this new mold bioweapon developed, ending with the nigh-perfected E-series. But while the tyrants and the parasites of the world were raining down their terror in supremely violent and undeniable ways, the mold series bioweapons were wholly different and insidious in their designs and methods.
A common appearance was selected for the bioweapons, that of a roughly 10-year-old girl, to ensure the ease of blending in with urban refugee populations. The first E-series specimens, named Evelyn, has proven capable of secreting the mutamycete from her tissue at will. It's also of note that Evelyn's mutamycete imposes a profound control over the body and mind when introduced into a host organism.
This weapon, it was not an 8-foot-tall lumbering mass of rage and muscle. The Connections chose a young girl as the visage of their armament, a genetically engineered monstrosity capable of far more than just spreading infection. She was
walking mold, capable of producing quantities far in excess of her own body weight if left unchecked.
But she was not intended to be a massively destructive weapon. She was intended to be subtle in her effects. Evelyn was aged rapidly to appear as a 10-year-old girl. Her health, age, and control over the mold within her was maintained through regular booster shots. So, let's discuss for just a moment what an encounter with the girl, Evelyn, what it would be like for her target.
Almost immediately after infection, the subject begins to see images of Evelyn, though she's not in fact there, and hear her voice, which is inaudible to anyone else.
Evelyn, codename E001, is inclined to want companionship, attention, help. To see a young girl begging for your aid, how could anyone ignore her? But as her grip tightens around her victim, the girl escalates her demands and her destructive behavior. She will even take to harming herself to garner the attentions of and a reaction from her victim, not because she is forced to do so, but
because it's in her nature to be this. It's just what she is. The psychological shock this induces helps to break down the mind's natural barriers to Evelyn's brainwashing effect. By the time the mental control is achieved, the mutamycete infection has progressed throughout the body's cells, so the body work.
The E-type weapon was relentless in her pursuit of her goal, being highly manipulative if required to achieve it. It made her nigh unstoppable, but this child, her warped age and her immature mind, perhaps this was a flaw in the planning of the Connections.
What's been interesting to observe in Evelyn's behavior is her obsession with the concept of family. In experiments, we found multiple occasions the infected subjects were compelled to act as her mother or father, treating her as if she were really their daughter. Why did she settle upon family as a theme for her mental control? This is just speculation, but it could be that she instinctively understands that a family unit is better suited to blending into social groups than a lone girl.
In 2014, the Connections became aware that competitors knew of Evelyn's existence. So as not to risk the security of their weapon, in October,
transport aboard a large, massive cargo ship called the Annabelle was arranged to smuggle the E-001 into Central America.
Selected to accompany Evelyn as her caretakers were Agent Alan Droney and researcher Mia Winters. From the outside, the trio looked like a small family unit that was just getting a ride on a tanker rather than a proper passenger ship. Out of place, but certainly not the strangest thing in the world. Mia Winters displayed a sort of irritation with the whole thing when sending a video message to her husband, Ethan Winters. She was often away for work, telling her husband that she worked for a trading company of some sort rather than a bioweapon manufacturer. But while in the Gulf of Mexico, the tanker ran into a massive storm, the onset of a hurricane. It's hard to say what exactly set Evelyn off.
Whether it was the fear of the swaying ship, the noise of what raged outside, or the excitement of the whole affair,
that she began to run amok on the Annabelle. Evelyn slipped away from Alan and Mia and began to vomit mold around the ship, infecting the crew and throwing everything into chaos. Evelyn began to refer to Mia as her mother, and she began to act quite possessively of her, being malicious and cruel to gain her compliance. And when Alan Droney paid the girl an insult in the form of a foul word, Evelyn infected and murdered the man in front of Mia. Then she infected Mia as well with the mold. In the panic of what was taking place, as the E-001 began tearing the massive ship apart, Mia sent her husband a final goodbye, beseeching him to stay away and to move on. The tanker was torn apart in the Gulf of Mexico. The now mold-infected Mia Winters is kept alive by Evelyn.
The two of them making it back to land in Louisiana bayou of Dulve. We don't know what happened on the Annabelle, but we've located Evelyn. Extraction of the E-001 is impossible. She's too far out of control and would never willingly return to our custody. All we can do now is handle the situation from afar. So long as she stays on the we can figure this out. The sinking of the Annabelle can be covered up. But will we be able to contain the spread of information when Evelyn starts making demands? What will happen when the mutamycete within her is left unchecked?
The chaos of the hurricane making landfall, it kept the Baker family locked down for nigh on a week. When finally it was safe enough to venture out, the patriarch of the family, Jack Baker, took a walk about his lands to gauge the damage. He found parts of the Annabelle in his bayou, and he found Mia Winters. He took her back to the family home and he gave her shelter, but she begged them not to call the authorities and warned them of a 10-year-old girl that could still be out in the bayou. Against her wishes, Jack went out to search for the little girl, eventually finding Evelyn and bringing her back to the family home.
He had no idea what he'd done.
Jack was immediately infected, and taking the girl back to the home doomed the entirety of the Baker family. Jack, his wife Marguerite, his son Lucas, and daughter Zoe were contaminated with mold within the day. Jack Baker himself actually hunting down his own children to force them into Evelyn's presence. Mia Winters and the Baker family were to be a part of Evelyn's family, that one thing that she wanted the most. Jack and Marguerite in particular were violently affected by Evelyn. Within a matter of weeks, they were entirely consumed by mold, their humanity all but lost. They became rage-fueled, empowered with healing and strength. Marguerite became infested with insects that she could in turn physically incubate and control. Lucas was always problematic, unable to control his anger or understand his own emotion, uncaring towards the well-being of others, and dangerously intelligent, a natural inventor. Now the young man would possess the physical prowess and healing to make him a bioweapon of a wholly lethal sort. But his father would be the absolute juggernaut and enforcer of the family unit. Jack Baker's violence and power made him a tyrant-akin monster once the mold supplanted his humanity. And then the abductions began. After all, Evelyn, she needed a family, a big, happy family. Jack and Lucas took people who were less likely to be missed, the homeless, drifters, people who were passing through, tourists even. If Evelyn's powers didn't kill them, then Jack would out of jealousy or Marguerite out of rage. The geographically isolated Baker family became more and more seclusive and withdrawn, making their activities a complete unknown to the wider public. As victims were collected in neighboring population centers, the Baker family ranch became little more than a local spooky story, a part of the mythos rather than a source of the crimes, no doubt thanks to the influences of the connections to keep their bioweapon a safe secret. In January of 2015, about 3 months after Evelyn's arrival, Lucas Baker was intercepted by the connections. He was treated for and inoculated against Evelyn's telepathic influences, though the mold in his body could not be removed. It was far too late for that. Lucas became an agent of the connections, an on-the-ground informant, and he assisted them in getting a research lab set up on the Baker Ranch in a nearby derelict salt mine, which he eventually took the lead researcher role in. The intelligence of Lucas Baker, it cannot be overstated, nor can his maliciousness. He set up traps around the estate to toy with any victims that he could trap or fool. He would make his test subjects fight one another, he would do unnecessary autopsies on victims, and carry on in such a way that other researchers on the grounds were repulsed and frightened by him. But Lucas managed to fool Evelyn into thinking that he was still under her control, and the intel that he reported back to the connections was invaluable in securing the site and keeping everything going on there a complete secret. As the Bakers settled into their new life, Evelyn eventually backed off from her mind control tactics just a bit. The daughter, Zoe, gained back enough of her senses to leave the main house, to live in a trailer nearby, and to have nothing to do with the activities of the family. Her parents berated her for this, but Evelyn herself didn't really seem to care about Zoe, at least once the excitement of the abductions began. The girl's attentions were placed elsewhere. But into the fall of the year 2016, almost 2 years after Evelyn's arrival, the girl began to deteriorate. She hadn't received any of her stabilizing medication from the connections, so she resumed her rapid aging process. Lucas commented in his messages to the higher-ups at the connections that her skin was getting wrinkly, her hair was going gray, like she was getting old all of a sudden. This did not slow down the kidnappings and murders, however. The exact body count is hard to say, but publicly the number was known to be at least 20. A drop in the bucket given how many bodies and fully molded monstrosities roamed the underbelly of the estate. The number could easily be in the hundreds. In June of 2017, a 3-man crew came to the house. Drawn in by rumors of a family murder and a haunted estate, the trio behind the internet series Sewer Gators believed the Baker's Ranch would be the perfect stage for the next episode of their show. One of them busted down the door, not realizing that Papa Jack Baker was nearby and that he wasn't partial to other men being on his property. Jack killed one of them as soon as he had the opportunity to do so. Mia murdered another one of them while under the control of Evelyn, and the last of them, a man named Clancy Jarvis, was taken as a candidate for Evelyn's mold infection. But in the end, Clancy fell victim to Lucas Baker's sick games. At this point, Evelyn was so aged that she was confined to a wheelchair and unable to communicate verbally. Her control over her environment had to be done telepathically through the Bakers. Mia Winters was locked away in the basement. But in July, the decrepit Evelyn forced Mia to send a message to her husband, Ethan Winters, bidding him to come and find her at the Baker family ranch in Dulvey, Louisiana. Ethan had not coped well with the loss of his wife, and when he got that message, he abandoned all common sense and drove to the estate. He did not alert authorities, nor did he investigate the Bakers themselves. He just got up and drove. And what he found there was a run-down, ill-kept, disturbing plot of land that once could have been beautiful, though for 3 years had fallen to the elements in disrepair. But he does find Mia's driver's license and some of her belongings, which is proof enough that his wife is here. Eventually, he dives through the muck of the house and he actually does find Mia in her holding cell within the basement. She's shocked that he's there. She has no memory of sending him that message, and no memory on how she even got there in the first place. But she panics that Jack is nearby, seizing the now desperate opportunity to try and escape with Ethan. But Evelyn has claimed Mia as her mother, and Ethan, well, he could be her father. Of course, she will not allow them to leave. The mostly lucid Mia is removed from the situation, probably by Jack Baker himself, allowing Evelyn to exert control over the woman while Ethan stumbles about the guest house. It's not long until the two are reunited, but Mia is not quite herself anymore. Under the control of Evelyn, there's little room for negotiation, and Mia will inflict whatever violence the bioweapon commands, even upon her own husband. In a brief moment of returned lucidity, Mia tries to incapacitate herself to spare Ethan's life. Unfortunate that Jack Baker locked him in, and Mia doesn't stay down for long, making an all-out fight against her unavoidable. Though even in the throes of a violent attack, little bits of Mia do shine through. She begs of Ethan to just go, to just leave her there, but it's not that easy. He cannot just waltz off the estate. Even if Mia doesn't stop him, there's always a backup to stop him from leaving. And to make this whole affair even worse, Evelyn's mold infection is spread through skin-to-skin contact. When Mia touches her husband, she is guaranteeing his infection. If he happened to make it this far without being exposed, now there is a 0 chance that he isn't. Ethan Winters, like the Bakers, will eventually become a being of mold. He's forced to drive an axe into the neck of his wife just for her to vanish, to then receive a phone call from the outcast Zoe Baker, beckoning him to flee through the attic. All he can do really is just stupidly follow instructions. None of this could possibly make any sense to the man. The manipulative tactics of Evelyn being used through Mia confuse Ethan long enough in the lower level of the house to allow Mia to pin him and then to retrieve a chainsaw. Oh baby, you know exactly where this is going. This is the first of Ethan Winters' grievous wounds that the mold will shield him from. Mia herself is able to remove herself from the situation to stop her attack, but this only lasts for as long as it takes Ethan to reach the attic, where once again he is forced to fight his wife. This time though, both of them are armed with dangerous weaponry, but neither of them will be able to bring the other down, not truly at least. He repeatedly shoots her in the face, and he does stop Mia, but it's only temporary. When Jack Baker appears from the darkness, having stood by for as long as this confrontation has required, he puts Ethan's ability to survive as a newly infected to the test. A massive hit to the face, and then a stomp. Ethan Winters lies clinically dead for several minutes, killed by Jack Baker. Jack hauls Ethan and Mia Winters back to the main family house. Mia has been behaving poorly and must be put away. Ethan, however, must meet the family. Evelyn has requested his presence. Whilst confined to a chair, Zoe sneaks in to staple his hand back onto his arm. It will fuse back together on its own quickly enough. And then it's time for the family feast. Offering of putrid offal and rotted meat courtesy of Marguerite. The 2 elders of the family are completely under the control of Evelyn, who sits at the table as well, unannounced and not acknowledged, unrecognizable as a bioweapon in her current form. Lucas, who thinks freely from the control of the E001, also has a place at the table, an absolute menace and an instigator, as well as a powerful bioweapon. So his father removing his arm at the dinner table is really little more than an aw shucks moment. It'll reattach or grow back. Who knows when it comes to Lucas? Ethan's refusal to consume what is before him leads to a complete meltdown by Marguerite, and for Jack to attempt to force-feed him. It's the convenient arrival of a nearby parish deputy, David Anderson, that stops the family dinner. Seems that a few months back, 3 men shooting an internet show went missing, and their last known location was near the Baker Ranch. Deputy Anderson would like to ask the family a few questions in regards to these men. Convenient for Ethan, it gives him time to break out of his bindings. Unfortunate for Deputy Anderson, because this place is a madhouse of violence. Ethan and the deputy do make contact for a brief moment, with the latter giving Ethan a knife for protection and to aid him in finding his way into the garage. But when the two have a face-to-face, well, Jack takes half of the deputies, and Ethan has himself a good old-fashioned traditional car fight against Papa Jack Baker, which then turns into an impaling fight, which then turns into a firefight, which then becomes an explosion fight, with the finale being a self-inflicted gunshot to Jack's face. But Jack warned Ethan, this wasn't really the end, of course not. As if his brain going missing could actually stop the patriarch of the family. There's so much more to come. Zoe makes another call to Ethan inside the house. She's out in her own little trailer and desperate to make her escape from this hellhole. But with her family always watching and her mold infection, she needs Ethan Winters to accomplish that. She directs him to find a way out of the house, which is an order that's far easier said than done. This place would give George Trevor and the Oswell mansion a run for its money. Puzzles, confusing corridors, locked doors, and creatures called molded in the lower levels. They're the failed converts of Evelyn, kidnapping victims who didn't retain their humanity once infected. They're living, walking, pulsating mold, though they're not unkillable, thankfully. Ethan eventually finds a tape left by his wife, made after their little chainsaw pistol fight in the guest house. She's as fine as she can be given the circumstances, and she tries to begin an explanation for what's going on. But the matriarch, Marguerite, has tracked her down. Ethan's foremost concern is his wife, and the contents of this tape are distressing. The apparition of the young Evelyn is appearing on tape, taunting and haunting Mia. And Marguerite herself corners the frightened woman underneath the house, dragging her away. But before Ethan can even leave the main house, he has to retrieve various items hidden around the building. One of them being in the possession of a reformed Jack Baker himself, who's really pulled himself together since the whole garage debacle. His lurking about the house will remain a threat to Mr. Winters, at least until Jack goes full scissorman chainsaw mode in the underbelly of the house, and a chainsaw versus chainsaw spectacle begins, though this time around, Jack really is not fooling about. But that's not to say he isn't thrilled to be here. He's a big bundle of laughs, the kind that almost makes one think that maybe he's mocking Ethan. But Mr. Winters claims victory this round, no small part thanks to his own ability to take a direct hit from a chainsaw as well now, his greatest advantage being the ability to think clearly. With everything needed to open the front door, Ethan's next stop is Zoe's trailer, but Zoe herself isn't there. She's out seeing to other affairs, but informs Ethan of the whole contamination issue, sort of. Zoe knows of a serum that can be made with reagents on the property. One of them her mother obsessively took custody of after the hurricane that brought Evelyn into their lives. A D-series bioweapon mummified arm. So long as they're contaminated with the mold, Evelyn will be able to find them and control them, and anyone they come into physical contact with in the outside world can also be contaminated by it. Zoe sends Ethan into the old house where Mia was taken, where Marguerite roams, and where that D-series arm is being held. Inevitably, Ethan does have to deal with Marguerite. While not as outright physically powerful like her husband, Marguerite has a swarm of tricks at her disposal to handle him and high mobility to make her difficult to track. One of the few things that can stop her approach is constant and direct fire, though eventually enough bullets could achieve the same stopping power. She is the first of the family to truly die, calcifying and wasting away, unable to heal through the damage done to her entire body. Taking Marguerite's lantern gives Ethan access to the weird child's play area, where the D-series arm is attached to a strange, skin-covered doll created by Marguerite. And now, Evelyn is beginning to directly target and interact with Ethan, a display of her influence growing over him and the mold inside him becoming stronger. If not stopped, Evelyn will have Ethan in her grasp within a day. Back at Zoe's trailer, the phone rings once again, but it is not Zoe on the other end. It's Lucas. He wants to play now. He has Mia and Zoe both locked up and the rest of the D-series parts to create a serum, which gives him all the power in this situation. Ethan has to play along. It takes him to a good old barn fight with the Fat Man Mold Monster, which is actually quite charming. Kinda reminds me of home. And then into an escape room from hell with very real consequences for playing by the rules. It's sort of a hobby of Lucas's, make traps and puzzles that can't be beaten and really toy with anyone unlucky enough to get caught in one. And when Ethan does circumvent the rules and break the sequence of the escape room, Lucas has a meltdown and flees the area, leaving behind the case containing the remainder of the D-series reagents to create 2 doses of the serum. The plan is for Zoe to get one and Mia the other, not taking into account that Ethan is also infected, but perhaps Mia isn't privy enough on the nature of the mold to realize that her husband is contaminated as well. And this really isn't a terrible plan. Treat the 2 women and flee the property. until Jack Baker once again rears his now wholly malformed ugly head into the situation, pulling Ethan into one more fight to the death. Jack is aware that his Marguerite is dead, and he even now mourns her passing and is intent on killing Ethan for what he's done to his family. Of the 2 doses of the serum that the party possesses, it's too bad that Jack will require one to stop his attack. He's so far into infection at this point that curing him will cause his entire body to calcify and fall apart. Finally, Jack Baker meets his end, at least physically for now. Zoe and the Winters will no longer have to contend with the monolith, but that leaves the problem of the one remaining dose. Who gets it, Zoe or Mia? Of course, Ethan came all this way and held out hope for 3 years that his wife would come back somehow. The dose will go to Mia, to the absolute dismay of Zoe Baker, who orders them to just leave. Evelyn will never allow her off this property. She may not leave. And as Mia and Ethan finally make it out into a small boat, Evelyn punishes Zoe for her insolence, calcifying her but not killing her. Here, Zoe will remain until another from the Baker family arrives to find her and save her. Ethan and Mia make it as far as some of the wreckage of the Annabelle before Evelyn finds and stops them. But when the water settles, it is Ethan that Evelyn takes, integrating into the mold and removing him from Mia's presence. It's now up to her to seek out her spouse, to find him in the wreckage of the Annabelle, where the visage of Evelyn is roaming to taunt and torment Mia, to try and force her back into compliance, trying to make her remember everything that took place, eventually succeeding in this endeavor. But Mia rejects the girl's requests to act as the mother that Evelyn always so dearly wanted. It will just take some time, but eventually Evelyn will be able to crawl her way back into Mia's mind, even if just temporarily. She finds Ethan entwined in mold within the ship, where within the living consciousness of the mutamycete, the Bakers still linger on. Jack Baker, or whatever remains of him, makes contact with Ethan, trying to explain what happened to his family, why they've done the things that they have. He tells Ethan that he needs to find Evelyn, the real Evelyn, and put a stop to her. That's the only way that this madness taking place can come to an end. And when Ethan awakens, being pulled out of the mold by his wife, she echoes the same thing. Mia gives him a sample of Evelyn's tissue and sends him away, returning to the clutches of Evelyn for a while. She's giving him an opening to return to the Baker Ranch, while Evelyn concentrates on her much-desired mother.
The Baker farm has become an uncontrollable mess with the arrival of Ethan Winters. Therefore, leadership has ordered a complete withdrawal of any personnel still within the area. We've gotten word that Blue Umbrella knows of the E-001's location and has contacted the Bioterrorism Security Assessment Alliance to coordinate a raid on the property. Their arrival is imminent. Electronics still on the network will be remotely destroyed and/or scrubbed as much as possible, but the BSAA will certainly find sensitive documentation within the salt mine that will lead back to us. And to top it off, we've lost contact with Lucas Baker. This is a disaster.
His route back takes him through the old labs of the Connections, where evidence of Lucas's involvement in the events and precisely what this E-type weapon is was left in the chaos of mass murder and mold infections, and where a kit to make an E-necrotoxin is still located, exactly what he will need to handle this bioweapon. Over the radio, there's chatter of a cavalry arriving, and of Lucas Baker being nearby in one of the salt mines. Ethan, however, heads straight to the Baker family home, back to the underground, where he and Mia fled their confinement earlier in the evening. Evelyn commences an assault on his mind, putting whatever barriers in his way that she can. Her aged body is vulnerable, and she doesn't yet have full control over the man. But he does find the center of her projection, and he injects the E-001 herself with the E-necrotoxin. But it's not going to be that simple. It's never that simple, is it? In a final hurrah, a final lashing out in rage, the out-of-control weapon begins to rapidly increase her mass and attacks. The calcification of her rapidly growing body is too slow to stop her in her tracks, but the lumbering beast has caught the eye of a group descending upon the area. Oh my, look who it is. It's the BSAA. And they have just the ammo type to handle a fungal infection, rapid-acting mycetotoxic rounds. An old friend of ours contacts Ethan and orders him to shoot the damn thing into Evelyn. The ramrod is able to stop her regeneration and growth long enough for the E-necrotoxin to kill Evelyn. An older, more hardened Chris Redfield has led this foray into mold territory. At this point, he's seen so many types of bioweapons that little can faze him. The BSAA retrieves Mia and Ethan, but that's not quite the end. The Baker Ranch must be quarantined, the Baker children must be found, and a cover-up must begin. Under the command of Chris Redfield, BSAA agents eventually find a still calcified Zoe Baker several weeks later, as does her uncle, Joe Baker. And Joe is unwilling to just leave her in their custody. A BSAA agent tells him that there's a cure for what's happened to her, and Uncle Joe will do anything to see she gets a full dose. A terrible, shambling version of his brother, Jack Baker, is stalking the bayou, for now only known as the Swamp Man. The revelation that this is what has become of his brother shocks and devastates Joe. But when the Swamp Man takes Zoe, Joe vows to do whatever it takes to see her saved and cured. And he does, though it may pain him to do so. Joe Baker fights hordes of molded for his niece, and he puts his brother Jack to rest in a final showdown. The BSAA is able to recover from the attacks and to cure Zoe Baker. She will be taken into custody, quarantined, but eventually released. Her brother Lucas, however, will not be so fortunate. He has been in contact with an unknown source, trying to arrange extraction, trying to send data about the Mutamycete and Evelyn. But while Lucas Baker is many devious things and wildly unpredictable, he is not the nigh unkillable beast that his father proved to be, or the sinister combatant that his mother was. Chris Redfield finds Lucas, provokes a wild mutation after delivering an otherwise fatal blow to him, and is ultimately killed on his family's property. His data transmission is halted, and evidence of his deeds will be concealed, along with all other information on the events that took place here. In the aftermath of all this, the BSAA took great measures to cover up everything that happened on the Baker Ranch. The death of the family was attributed to a hydrogen sulfide leak, and the entirety of the area was sealed off to prevent curious onlookers from descending upon the destroyed ranch. Posts on social media and armchair detectives smelled a conspiracy at play, but the cover-up was extremely effective. Zoe Baker was included in the victim count, but eventually she was issued a new identity and allowed to live a new life. The Winters went into protective custody and were relocated to Europe to protect them from the connections who were almost certainly intent on searching for them. Mia kept her husband's mold infection a secret. If the BSAA, or anyone for that matter, found out, he would never get to live a normal life. Quite soon after their relocation, the two had a baby. A girl that they named Rosemary, a child born of a Mutamycete immune mother and a father practically made out of mold. Little Rosemary was quite special indeed. Mia Winters was able to find out that Zoe Baker was alive and sent her a letter detailing a bit about their new lives and the birth of Rosemary, much to the joy of Zoe. She had tried to search for answers as to what happened to her family after her release from BSAA custody, but she never really found closure. Knowing that Mia and Ethan had made it out helped in that process. But Chris Redfield, he was absolutely incensed at the cover-up the BSAA did in regards to the Dolby incident and their handling of information in regards to the mold there. The BSAA had known of Evelyn's existence before the bioweapon was even put on the Annabelle for relocation, but had failed to stop what the Connections was doing. It wasn't until the bioweapon watchdog, Blue Umbrella, contacted the BSAA when the situation could no longer be avoided that action was taken and information was shared, and their failure 3 years ago was covered up. After Dolby, there were no answers forthcoming, no investigation into the mysterious organization behind the Mutamycete, and Chris Redfield was unwilling to just let the matter drop. Eventually, he went rogue, and he took the Hound Wolf squad with him, a small team of nigh perfectly trained soldiers who were absolutely ruthless in their pursuit of information in regards to the mold and its origins. And they would find answers in the year 2021 in Europe. For 3 long years, the rogue Hound Wolf Squad, led by Chris Redfield, viciously pursued answers for what happened in Dulvey, Louisiana. The BSAA was no longer trustworthy. Their deceit had gone too deep. The cover-up spread too far. And this was a sin that would not go unpunished. This mold, the mutamycete, its origins had to be traced. The Winters were under BSAA protection, constantly being surveilled. Everything in and out was tightly controlled. In those passing years, they experienced turmoil from the pain of what happened in Louisiana. Their marriage was suffering. The arrival of a baby girl, Rosemary, was unexpected and sudden, but a welcome addition to the home. But Miranda, Mother Miranda, eventually found out about Rosemary Winters. A leak within the BSAA betrayed the Winters family to her in early 2021, and Miranda believed that little Rose Winters would be the perfect vessel for the rebirth of her long-dead daughter. Rosemary was the child of a mold-immunized mother and a father composed of it. She was truly unique, much like her father. Superhuman from birth, though not apparently so. In early February, Miranda found and abducted Mia Winters. She intended to take Mia's place within the household to gain unfettered access to baby Rosemary. Miranda herself was a bioweapon. For over 100 years, she had been infected with and working with the mold. She was perhaps the most dangerous being to ever exist, but she wielded her power with restraint. Using Mia's DNA, Mother Miranda was able to assume her identity and incorporate herself into the Winters' home, believing that Rosemary herself would reject and fight her unless she looked precisely like her mother. Ethan and Mia had been experiencing marital problems, unresolved trauma, and secrets were tearing them apart. Miranda's behavior as Mia was out of character, but not so much so that Ethan became suspicious of anything.
It was by the skin of the connection's teeth that we were able to withdraw from Louisiana and remain intact. Most fortuitous of the BSAA to so fervently engage in their cover-up, they practically did our work for us. It's truly amazing what weak men will do to conceal their failures. Our work continues, but I must express utmost concern in the passing of intel to the woman Miranda. Our mole within the BSAA is not under the employ of Miranda, so why is she included in the leak? If I may be so bold, the woman is unstable and unpredictable. She's more apt to cause another Dulvey incident than to solve the secrets of the mutamycete. We're on track. We're making progress. We don't need Miranda. Her supposed 4 lords are empowered children. Why was this allowed to happen?
The Hound Wolf Squad caught on to Mother Miranda's identity and ploy during her infiltration, and they acted immediately, ruthlessly. Under the dark of night, they raided the home. To Ethan, it looked as though his wife was murdered in front of him, taking repeated direct gunshots from a hidden gunman, and then a direct shot to the head from Chris Redfield. It's their intention to take Rosemary and Ethan Winters into custody, but Redfield doesn't explain any of what's going on. This looks like a cruel murder and abduction, wildly confusing for Ethan. He's knocked senseless, forced to watch Chris Redfield walk away with his daughter and put into the back of a van. But Mother Miranda isn't going to be stopped by a bullet to the brain. No, of course not. That's kind of a silly thought, isn't it? When the convoy nears her lands, Miranda springs back to life and thrashes it. She takes baby Rosemary and leaves whoever survived the event to freeze to death or to be claimed by the residents of the village. In the decades of Miranda's experimentation, countless victims of her cruelty were changed into a variety of failed Cadou beasts. Lycans, Varkalak, the Urias, and their many forms now roam the village. Once upon a time, Mother Miranda ensured that the failed subjects were removed from the land to keep the civilians safe, but with Rosemary Winters now in her custody, those inhabitants are less important than they were before. They're not needed. Under her command, the ghouls and monsters of the forest are now descending upon the village, claiming it as their own domain, killing all within to feed the all-consuming black god, the fungal mold, the megamycete. But poor Ethan. He simply has no idea of what he's stepping into.
I goddamn knew something was gonna happen. And I'm leaving this on record because I haven't served the connections for this long just to be ignored. Least of all by Bailey. Redfield and those mutts outplayed the BSAA by getting into that house. Rosemary Winters was our target. She was part of our proposed project. And now she's neck deep in that werewolf dragon hellhole. Please listen to me. We have to pull the plug on this. Everything is compromised. The connections cannot cover this up if it escalates. And in case you forgot what happened in Louisiana, let me give you a spoiler. It's going to escalate. Get the executives on the line. Get leadership in a room together. I'll lay it out for them myself, but we can't sit back and watch this from afar this time.
Miranda immediately took little Rosemary to a sacred ceremonial site where the baby was crystallized much like Zoe Baker had been, to ensure that she would survive the process to come. Then, the crystallized Rosemary was cut into 4 pieces. Eventually, Miranda would place these 4 parts of the child into the mold beneath the village, once the megamycete had consumed as much human life as it needed to become powerful enough to remake the child's body. Then, the stored consciousness of her long-dead daughter would be placed into Rosemary, and she would be remade through the mold as Eva. The 4 pieces of Rose were placed into sealed flasks, and the 4 lords of the land were each given a segment for safekeeping until the supposed black mold god, the megamycete, was ready for Miranda's ritual. But poor Ethan. He has no idea what's befallen his daughter. He thinks his wife is dead. Now all that matters is finding Rose. He'll go through hell and back to do it too. Without a moment of hesitation, Ethan Winters enters the village and begins to fervently seek out any clues as to where his little girl was taken.
Apologies for my earlier records. I've just come from a meeting with the higher-ups. It's been decided that we will slip intel to the BSAA, revealing the location of Miranda and the Winters family when the time is opportune. It is almost certain that they will dispatch their own bioweapon units into the area. I will personally monitor the situation and control the flow of information to outside assets. This is acceptable.
This place is cold, desolate, harrowing, and decor and gore. Terrible acts of violence took place in the streets. The first person that Ethan comes across is a local man who's righteously terrified of anything that moves. In fact, he fires on Ethan as soon as he uncovers his hiding spot. But this moment of panic will cost him. The lichens that lurk about are alerted to his presence, and a hunt begins to find him. It takes no time for the man's fate to be sealed, and Ethan is next on the menu. In the nooks and crawl spaces of the houses are stowed away the corpses of the townsfolk. Here the lichens feed safely in the darkness and security of a contained area. Ethan bids adieu to 2 of his fingers and gets a first-row seat into what is awaiting him in this damned place. He has no direction to follow, no leads to pursue, but now he knows that this place is far from abandoned. All he can do is move forward through the village, avoiding and killing whatever he must as he goes. But in the east old town of the village, well, he gets chased down. Lichens descend on his location. He's locked into the corner like a rat. Even the massive Arius falls on the area to hunt this man down. It's by the grace of the castle bells tolling, a command to the creatures of the village, that Ethan is spared a violent end at the hands of the Arius. And in their wake, a strange old woman appears. One of the mimicry disguises of Mother Miranda, no doubt come to see what all the commotion is about, and Ethan's arrival in her village, well, it could be advantageous. The Black God will need more sacrifices to grow in power. Ethan could serve in this task, if given the proper motivation, like the salvation of his daughter. I mean, there's nobody that he wouldn't kill, right? Well, this strange old woman, she warns him that Rose is in great danger, that all has fallen into chaos since Miranda brought Rose here. The toll of the castle bells once again signals that danger is soon to return. It's all the man needs to push him to the point of no return. Rose is here, she's in danger, so there is no going back. The next sign of life is found across the village, a young woman named Elena, who's trying to help her seemingly ill father Leonardo to a nearby home, that of a woman named Louisa, in hopes of finding shelter. But it's too dangerous for them to venture out of the shed that they're hiding in. So Ethan decides to help them to get past the gate up to Louisa's house. It's strange that the lichens have not forced their way into this home yet. The survivors here are in tatters and terrified, but at least initially this does seem to be a place of safety. When all are within, Louisa demands an end to harsh words between parties, and a prayer is commenced. It's a prayer to the supposed great ones of their land, to the megamycete by reference, and to Mother Miranda herself. But these people, they will not survive to see the day's end. The man, Leonardo, who was just granted sanctuary here, is not just sick. He's infected with the lichen disease transmitted to him by one of the beasts, and he's lived long enough for the infection to take hold. Elena and Ethan are able to escape the immediate room whilst Leonardo kills everyone within and ignites a spreading fire. The shock of this sudden, violent escalation is dumbfounding to behold. Elena has to shoot her own father to keep him from tearing Ethan to shreds, but this forced action is of course devastating to her, even if it was required to save a life. When the two break through the house and find a path to an exit in the attic, Elena doesn't have the will to go on and falls back into the burning rubble, into the home with her father. This was possibly the last bastion of humanity in this place, and it's actively burning to the ground. Ethan is on his own. His best bet now is to just go to the castle off in the distance. In an undercroft of the castle, a haggard-looking man makes Ethan's acquaintance. Sort of. Seems Ethan's known around the who's who of this land, and chancing over the outsider was a happy little accident. And whoever this man is, well, calling him special wouldn't be an overstatement in the least. He's unlike anything Ethan has ever seen before. A real-life Magneto that's invested in taking Ethan to see Mother Miranda. A little bit of shrapnel to the heart puts Ethan out of commission long enough for the bearded fellow to drag him through a tunnel to parts unknown. And when he awakens, a gaggle of strange characters are caught up in an argument over who should get to handle this man, or at least two of them are in conflict over it. Mother Miranda herself is identified as the woman in black, residing over this presumed family meeting, as the giant woman in white and the weird bearded man berate each other like ill-adjusted siblings at an unwanted family reunion. Miranda calls the weird bearded man Heisenberg, and gifts him the honor of handling Ethan Winters, much to the absolute fierce chagrin of the fuming lady in white. And this strange man, Heisenberg, decides that Ethan will put on a show for all in attendance by meeting a gruesome death in an obstacle course of sorts, made up of crude machinery and riled-up lichens, though Ethan Winters manages to avoid being torn apart by anything Heisenberg has to offer, at least for now. He makes it through the bizarre tunnels and finds himself in front of that castle, but he's not alone out here. Ooh, not anymore. A most peculiar character makes his acquaintance before the gates. An apparent traveling salesman who calls himself the Duke, yet he seems to be so much more than just a merchant. He has insights that those only in positions of power or influence would know. In fact, he recognizes Ethan on the spot. The Duke will act as a trading post and a guide of sorts for Ethan whenever he needs steered in the proper direction. Though he's certainly not hostile towards Ethan, the intentions and desires of the Duke are quite uncertain, but around here, he's the closest thing to an ally that Ethan has to call upon. And this marvelous, sprawling estate. It's Castle Dimitrescu, home of one of the four lords of this land. But there doesn't seem to be any life here. The grounds are quiet, and the aura here is just cold and unwelcoming. It doesn't take long for some of the ladies of the house to catch on to the presence of a man. 3 daughters of the House Dimitrescu intercept Ethan, Bella, Cassandra, and Daniela. They materialize out of swarms of blowflies, but how they're able to do this is a marvel of creativity and outstanding fortune. But before their stories are laid out, however, the giggling trio see this man thing delivered to their mother, the lady in white.
Subject name, Alcina Dimitrescu. Cadu affinity, most favorable. Brain functions, normal. Regeneration rate is incredibly fast. The subject can heal any external wounds within seconds, and grow her nails into claws in mere moments. Rapid regeneration also means an increased body size. Note, due to a hereditary blood disease, the subject must ingest human flesh and blood on a regular basis to maintain regeneration properties. I suspect that if the subject's regeneration is not properly balanced, then she may mutate uncontrollably. An unfit vessel for Eva.
Born in the early 1900s, but not of the village, Alcina was of noble blood that carried in it a hereditary disease. As a young woman, Alcina Dimitrescu was a jazz singer and a woman of the world. In the mid-1940s, Alcina returned to her family homelands nearby the village, where she lived peacefully for some years. Until sometime in the 1950s when, at the age of 44, Mother Miranda implanted one of her Cadu parasites into her. Lady Dimitrescu became mighty in stature and strength, and like Mother Miranda, unaging. but possibly due to her hereditary disease, she relied on human blood to sustain her. While Alcina Dimitrescu was a divinely empowered being in harmony with her Cadou parasite, she was not useful to Mother Miranda as anything other than a subordinate. And Lady Dimitrescu came to jealously seek out the favor of Mother Miranda. Any competition for her attention was angrily rebutted and bemoaned privately. Not long after Alcina's transformation, the corpses of 3 young women were brought to the castle by Mother Miranda. Under Lady Dimitrescu's observation, the corpses were slowly consumed by blowflies created by a Cadou parasite over the course of a week. When their bodies were fully consumed, the 3 women were remade as countless blowflies that could combine back into their human forms. Lady Dimitrescu immediately bonded with the 3 women who had no memories of their previous lives. They became her daughters, which she was extremely protective and possessive of. She named them Bella, Cassandra, and Daniela, and just like their mother, they relied on the consumption of human blood to sustain them. However, unlike their mother, they were extremely vulnerable to cold weather, so much so that they couldn't even leave the castle. Over the course of the next several decades, Lady Dimitrescu and her beloved daughters feasted upon inhabitants from the village, in particular, the men. But before the lady and her daughters can do anything with Ethan Winters, consent must be obtained from Mother Miranda, so they leave him to hang while Mother goes to make a phone call. Ethan manages to wiggle his way out of the situation and back into exploration of the castle, where he soon encounters one of the daughters, the golden-haired Bella, who is all too willing to chase her prey down and stalks Ethan through the castle. It's an accident that while attempting to shoot Bella, a ricocheting bullet busts out a window, allowing the freezing air of outside to flood the room and weaken her. Remember, the Dimitrescu daughters are vulnerable to the cold. And with this exposure, Bella is suddenly not quite so invulnerable to bullets. She is the first of the Dimitrescu daughters to fall. And soon after, Lady Dimitrescu hears of Bella's death and is nearly overcome in rage at the loss. During her call with Mother Miranda, Alcina is told that Ethan must not be killed, regardless of what's happened in the castle. And though she will comply with Miranda's demands in the moment, the lady's powerful emotion begins to consume her, and she decides she's gonna kill him anyways. She gets a cathartic moment of hands-on punishment with Ethan, slamming his head into the floor repeatedly and sending him careening down into a lower level. But Lady D is not going to just let him go after a few hits. She actively pursues him through the lower levels, taking off his hand as soon as he's within reach. The other hand, in case you were wondering, not the one that Mia took off in Dulvey, Louisiana. He's now had both of his hands removed. But this time, he figures out that he can just shove it back on the stump and it will reattach. A very clear indicator that something is very special about Ethan, if it wasn't already immensely clear before. Ethan evades the rampaging Lady Dimitrescu and goes on to end Cassandra and then Daniela. The daughters of House Dimitrescu are no more, and the lady is absolutely livid with this man. Within the castle, hidden away from prying eyes and vengeful hands, is a weapon called the Dagger of Death's Flower, coated in a flurry of poisons meant to kill demons and monsters according to the fable. It's a potential weapon to wield against the ultra-empowered Lady Dimitrescu. Ethan does find that dagger within the coffin of a man who once tried to steal it and kill the lady of the castle. And Alcina arrives right on time to skewer Ethan and to, in turn, take a diabolical dagger through the ribcage. The sudden surge of poison sends her body into a tailspin, causing her to completely lose control of her physical form. Alcina's mutation transforms her into a dragon-like beast quite befitting of the lady. The two fight atop the castle walls, but in the end, Alcina Dimitrescu joins her daughters in oblivion. Her reign has finally ended, and one of the 4 lords is now dead. A filthy flask atop an altar is Ethan's reward at the end of this. He has no clue what's inside, but he takes it anyways. The path back to the village takes him through a short cave, where the wretched old woman from earlier in the day is chanting that strange prayer over a small altar. The symbol used by the Umbrella Corporation is etched upon the stone wall. Oswell E. Spencer once stood here. He studied alongside Miranda. This village is the birthplace of so many horrors that would take place in the later 1900s and into the new millennium. The riddle speak of the old woman beckons Ethan on to the other 3 lords of this land. but the reasoning for it isn't immediately clear. The Duke is waiting for Ethan to make his way back from the castle, and informs him that the dirty flask he obtained was indeed a treasure worth retrieving, because it's a part of his daughter. It's Rosemary. The shock of the moment, of course, it breaks his heart. He can't quantify through the confusion of what he's seeing. But the Duke is able to provide words of guidance. Rosemary's essence is intact, and she can be restored. She's as unique as her father and quite powerful, even now. After some fetching of required items to proceed, the Duke directs Ethan towards the 3 remaining lords who hold the rest of his daughter Rosemary. His next stop is House Beneviento.
Subject name, Donna Bonaviento. Cadou affinity, favorable. Brain function, normal, although severe mental illness. Physically, she is no different from a regular human. However, she can secrete a signal-producing substance which controls plants infected by the mutamycete. When humans absorb the pollen from a particular flower, she can cause them to have hallucinations. However, she is mentally underdeveloped and has divided her Cadou among her dolls in order to control them from a distance. An unfit vessel for Eva.
Sometime in the 1950s, shortly before a Cadou was implanted into Alcina Dimitrescu, Mother Miranda claimed the 21-year-old sister of Donna Beneviento as a test subject. Bernadette was her name, and the death of this young woman tore the Beneviento family apart. Donna already was delayed mentally as a child. She carried a huge scar down her face that made her feel isolated from others, and when her parents also died soon after Bernadette, little Donna was left alone to completely retreat into her own broken mind. The only way she could carry out communication was through a doll her father had made for her called Angie. When Donna came of age, she passed her time making toy dolls to act as her companions. Mother Miranda had an affection for Donna and implanted a Cadou parasite into her. It would either kill her and end her sad life or give the young woman a new chance at life. Donna survived the process, and unlike the other lords of the village, she did not experience dramatic physical or mental change. She remained quite herself, but Mother Miranda considered her to be defective in this state. Regardless, Donna was bestowed a seat as one of the 4 lords and kept the sentimental favor of Mother Miranda. Donna gained the ability to make those infected with a particular mutamycete spore hallucinate. The vivid, world-bending, mind-altering sort of hallucination that makes distinguishing reality from mind control almost impossible in its vividness. And she could impart part of her Cadou powers into her dolls, make them come alive, so to speak. Though it was exceedingly rare, her only way to communicate with others was using her doll, Angie, as a mouthpiece. Whilst en route to the Beneviento estate, Ethan breathes in the mold flower spores that Donna used to cause hallucinations and take control over others. What manifests is Mia, crying over something being wrong with Rosemary, that she doesn't want Ethan to leave her. It's a cruel display, remember. Ethan thinks that Mia is gone. The house of Beneviento itself is idyllic, like it's from a different time and place than that of Castle Dimitrescu. It's one of the most welcoming sights thus far in the village, a seeming warm and well-kept home fit for a large family, at least until Ethan descends to the lower level of the home and is greeted by Angie, sitting motionless, holding part of Rosemary. When Ethan tries to take the flask, the fun really begins. Donna Beneviento inflicts horror on Ethan without even being in the room. He must interact with images and puzzles involving a dead Mia, fumble through dark corridors alone, recall memories of his daughter's life, and that's not even to mention Donna's creepy dolls themselves. And when that's not enough to break him, visceral and obscene tactics are used to outright terrify him. But he makes it back to the upper level, where Donna herself is waiting with Angie, urging him into a game of hide-and-seek with the doll. But at the end of the chase, using scissors as a weapon, Ethan corners and kills Donna, ending the tragically lonely life of the bioweapon and taking the remaining lords down to 2. There are other fish to fry in the village, namely the 3rd lord of this region, whose domain lies to the north.
Subject name, Salvatore Moreau. Cadou affinity, low. Brain function, surprisingly low. The Cadou has caused drastic changes to internal organs, transforming them into organs similar to fish-like gills in a swim bladder. Another subject with irregular cell division, causing him to transform into a giant fish. The subject is unable to control this transformation. Too many defects, an unfit vessel for Eva.
Salvatore Moreau was a walking inferiority complex. Very little is known about his early life. When a Cadou parasite was implanted into him, he changed into a disfigured shamble of a humanoid with the intelligence of a raisin. His obsession with gaining Mother Miranda's attention and favor rivaled his brutality as a seeming curious medical mind. Moreau would perform strange experiments upon villagers in his quote-unquote clinic that always resulted in something macabre or outright violent happening. When Ethan reaches Moreau, he's apparently watching TV? And the flask he's supposed to be protecting is just sitting on the table. When he does finally realize that Ethan is there, the oaf is about 2 sentences away from spilling the beans on Mother Miranda's big plan as he begs Ethan to just give the flask back. He doesn't want the others to laugh at him, and he doesn't want to disappoint Mother Miranda. But when begging doesn't work, well, he blocks off the entrance and then tells Ethan that he's going to stop him before putting a barrier between the two. Maybe he's shy. Maybe he needs to do some prep before their big showdown. I don't know. Ethan is left to feel his way through the reservoir. To make it through, it needs to be drained, and this place is falling apart. But he isn't alone here. The Hound Wolf Squad is nearby, Chris Redfield himself, intent as always on being a poor communicator. Now in an almost infuriating way. Oh, Mr. Redfield, I do protest this behavior. But it's the thrashing of something in the water that ends their exchange. Now, Moreau is a little rough around the gills, not the sharpest tool in the shed. But damn if he isn't absolutely dedicated to really messing up Ethan's day. He might not be the brightest of the 4, but he certainly holds his own as a dangerous and capable combatant. The mere thought of Mother Miranda favoring Ethan over himself sends him into a jealous tizzy. He begins to vomit and can't maintain his form anymore. The Cadou parasite within him, triggering a massive transformation into a water-dwelling monstrosity. Twofold now is the purpose of draining the reservoir. It will have to be done just to stop him and get him into a line of sight. He's almost impossible to pin down otherwise, but after a long, drawn-out, multi-step confrontation with Salvatore Moreau, he too finally meets his end. And only one of the lords remain. And we know this one's name already, Heisenberg. But Heisenberg circumvents expectations and reaches out to Ethan even before he leaves Moreau's domain. He puts his flask someplace that Ethan can maybe get easier access to, an old fort. Seems kind of chill of Heisenberg to do, but that line of, do that and you pass, kind of seems foreboding, doesn't it? Well, that's because it is. The fort is absolutely infested with lichen, and Ethan was directed into a nest of them. Super not chill move, Heisenberg, especially since the mighty Urias dwells here as well. But if this was the easier of the 2 options, then just what is Heisenberg's estate like? Well, perhaps we'll find out. The final rosemary flask is waiting at the end of this whole affair. TV Heisenberg again offers Ethan directions. Put all 4 of the flasks into the giant's chalice, place the completed chalice into a ceremonial altar, and then come pay him a visit personally. Okay, fair enough. They're precise directions, so who are we to argue at this point? Putting all of the flasks into the chalice opens a new way forward, which seems a bit pompous for a man like Heisenberg. Ethan is able to take the massive chalice, place it upon an altar site, just like Heisenberg instructed, and this opens up a path directly into his compound. If he hadn't issued these instructions, Ethan would have been left to flounder and struggle to find a way through. Heisenberg really does seem to want an audience with him and is perfectly willing to betray Mother Miranda to do so. I wonder what he has to say. Well, Ethan is able to waltz right into his factory. There are no obstacles to contend with. And here, he finds proof that Heisenberg has been tracking Ethan's progress even before he arrived at the village. So, what does he have to say? Let's meet this mysterious 4th Lord.
Subject name, Carl Heisenberg. Cadou affinity, incredibly favorable. Brain function, normal. His electric organs similar to the electric ray Narca japonica. These electric organs are connected to the subject's nervous system. He can therefore pass control of electricity through the entire body, allowing control of magnetic fields which are used to move metal. Splendid specimen, but still an unfit vessel for Eva.
Heisenberg does not want Mother Miranda's approval. He doesn't want her to succeed in the rebirth of her child. He views her motives as selfish and ridiculous. All that power, just to bring a child back to life. He hates his supposed siblings. This forced family dynamic, he wishes to rebel and see Miranda killed, using Rosemary's power to do so. Though Ethan and Heisenberg do align in their hatred for the other lords and Mother Miranda, it's the use of his daughter, Rosemary, that really divides the two men. Ethan refuses to use her as a weapon, and Heisenberg is just too untrustworthy to make a compromise with. Who knows what his true endgame could be with Miranda out of the way? It could easily be exchanging one devil for another. So no deal is made. The two men now stand in complete conflict with one another. Heisenberg's factory compound is impressive, it's sprawling, and it's full of wild machinations and experiments gone terribly wrong or possibly terribly right depending on your perspective. It took genius, planning, and dedication to see this place built. And the beings that roam the grounds are unlike anything else in the village. Like this place too was from an entirely different time and place than anywhere else previously visited. And as luck would have it, look who else has chanced upon the Heisenberg estate. Master communicator Chris Redfield, except it seems that this time, he's actually willing to start talking. Ethan has already had a couple run-ins with Heisenberg. He knows what he's up against. So Chris finally starts to talk. As he should have done back in the Winters' home after the raid, he tells Ethan that the Mia they loaded up with bullets wasn't actually Mia at all. Of course, it was Miranda. All of this is part of the consequences of the Hound Wolf Squad underestimating her and not completing the job on their first try. Chris actually expected that if Ethan wasn't informed on the details of the situation, that he would just stay out of it. He would keep out of the way. As though he would just forget about his daughter and shrug off the death of his wife that easily. Chris finally explains everything to him, from Miranda's backstory to how it related to Louisiana and the Bakers to their next plan of actions in stopping her and retrieving Rosemary. He'll no longer oppose Ethan's involvement in the affair. Chris is going to finish planting explosives around Heisenberg's compound. Ethan will take a cute little tank up to the surface and the two will reunite topside. But as a final request before departing, Chris asks him to try and stay under the radar. How long do you think that will last? Immediately topside, a mutated Heisenberg greets Ethan. So much for under the radar. And if this isn't the epitome of bang bang into the room, then really what is? This fight can probably be heard for miles around. It's one Mecha Heisenberg versus Mini Mecha Ethan, but don't let Ethan's size fool you. This is a pretty square fight between the two sort of men. But damn if it isn't one of the least under the radar fights I've ever seen in my life. Heisenberg is felled in the end, going out in yet another grand explosion, one so loud that Chris Redfield can even hear it deep underground. Immediately following this grand conclusion, however, is the great evil that Ethan has for so long unknowingly been assisting, appearing as Mia as almost a sick taunt, an unnecessary flaunting of her superiority. Ethan isn't fooled, of course, but what is a gun going to accomplish here? It's a marvel that he was able to defeat Carl Heisenberg, and Heisenberg was afraid of directly facing Miranda himself. She remains with Ethan long enough to explain her plans for his daughter, that Rosemary will become her daughter reborn. Perhaps she's trying to comfort the man, give him some peace, express the logic of it, and how things will be all right in the end. Ethan, too, will join the catalog of the Megamycete. His DNA will be preserved, as though that's meant to be a comfort. All before she rips out his heart and leaves Ethan Winters for dead. And now it's time to experience this tale alongside our old friend. Chris Redfield is back in the driver's seat, newly informed of Ethan Winters' death. The Hound Wolf Squad has made preparations for their attack on Mother Miranda, plans slightly complicated by the BSAA arriving as though right on cue somehow. But they won't let the BSAA impact their mission. The 6 of them can accomplish together what a small army could do. Seems that when it comes to the hounds, Chris Redfield has exemplary communication skills. Unfortunately, the BSAA really opened up a can of worms with their extremely loud entrance. Everything is alerted to the presence of outsiders, which is going to make work for the hounds that much more difficult. The megamycete is already emerging. Miranda's strange ritual is underway, and now the street is flooded with agitated lichens. It would have been better had the BSAA not come at all, but Redfield is armed to the teeth in ways that Ethan Winters could really only dream of being. At the heart of the village is part of the megamycete, this black god the village has worshipped for over a century, and it takes repeated shots from long-range mortars just to clear out the surface-level mold, protecting what lies beneath the surface. And what's down in the earth is that now engorged megamycete that Mother Miranda has for so long been studying and feeding. With all the deaths that have taken place in the village and now the deaths of the 4 great lords, the megamycete is full and powerful enough for Miranda to bring her Eva back to life. But this isn't anything that a massive bomb can't fix. The megamycete itself isn't sentient. It doesn't wield psychic powers or super strength. It won't stand to defend itself. It's the brain of mold. So just blow it the hell up. The hounds will not leave until Mother Miranda is confirmed dead, however. Beyond the chamber of the megamycete, Chris finds a rather terrorized Mia Winters in a cage within Miranda's old lab. This whole time, this is where she's been, completely unaware of what's been going on outside, let alone what's become of her family. Chris informs her that Ethan has died, but Mia, she knows exactly what Ethan is. She never told him about her previous job within the Connections, of her link to Evelyn, of how much she actually knows about the mold. But Mia knows that Ethan, he's not dead, and she's quite correct. For a time, Ethan will once again walk within the megamycete, just as he did some years prior when speaking with Jack Baker. Except this time, it's Evelyn who taunts and jeers at him, as cruel as ever. But she answers questions that he hadn't realized that he had. She opens his eyes to the fact that Jack Baker murdered him 3 years ago. And the only reason his body moves is because he's wholly infected with mold. He's walking mold. This revelation comes as his body heals enough for him to return to the land of the living, where he rests in the back of the Duke's carriage. None of this seems to faze the Duke either. Ethan wants to go to where Miranda is, but the Duke has already been guarding him in that direction. He knew Ethan would recover and where he would want to go, and he's rather gentle in the conversation that they have. He certainly doesn't try to stop him either. Ethan is beginning to fall apart at this point. The outside world has no place for him anymore. So, next stop, Mother Miranda. Megamycete is covering the village now, pulsating and wriggling through every crevice in the stone. And at the center of it all is Miranda, pulling the product of a century's work from an altar of mold. The child she retrieves, though, there's something wrong. It's not her Eva. It's still Rosemary. And her power, it's beginning to fade away. Somehow, little Rosemary defied what Miranda was trying to do. She resisted being remade into something that she was not, and now the power of Miranda was waning. This doesn't mean that she's weak, however. Chris Redfield shoots her in the head, giving Ethan a chance to get the baby, but even a direct shot to the head isn't going to stop her but for a mere moment. Even if she doesn't have Eva, Miranda will not give up Rose. Ethan has long outstayed his usefulness and his welcome, so it's one final showdown, and this time, Miranda isn't untouchable. Rosemary has seen to that. Even with her assist, it is a brutal one-on-one between a mother who can't accept her loss and a father who won't abandon his girl. At the conclusion of this, yes, Miranda is stopped. It takes immense firepower and brute force to stop her, for her body to calcify and the madness to end, but Ethan also has been mortally wounded. He's falling apart, and now he too is beginning to calcify. His body can no longer keep up with what's been happening to him. He can't regenerate through it. Rather than attempting to make it to the evac, Ethan gifts to Chris Redfield the task of taking Rosemary away from this, or returning her to Mia, and keeping his family safe. And while Chris Redfield hates that this is even a request, that this unstoppable decay is falling upon Ethan, he accepts his request. Ethan Winters will remain here and initiate the detonation that will destroy the megamycete. This entire village will go with it, this cursed place. Well done, Ethan. Now you truly can rest. This is a devastating loss for Chris, one he will undoubtedly carry guilt over for the rest of his life, much like Piers. But of course the grief is more so for Mia. She had a hand in this, in his fate, in his suffering. But if not for the special person he became, who would have stood against Miranda in the end? If not for the power of Rosemary, how would her gambit have played out? The past can't be changed, but Mia has to get it right with Rosemary. This girl is powerful, and her father fought for her to have a chance at life. Though the death of Ethan Winters, it isn't the only troubling turn of events. The corpse of a BSAA soldier was brought onto the evac for Chris to inspect. And it would seem that in the 3 years since Chris and the Hounds went rogue, the BSAA has entered into the bioweapon market. These soldiers aren't entirely human. They're infected with something. There's no rest for the wicked. The Hound Wolf Squad will next be descending upon the BSAA Europe headquarters. An undisclosed amount of time later, an almost grown Rosemary Winters goes to visit her father's grave, traveling aboard a bus wearing her father's old jacket no less. She looks just like her mother, but with Ethan's golden locks. She never knew her dad, but without a doubt she's heard stories about him and knows just how much he loved her. An unmarked black truck, quite like the ones the Hound Wolf Squad used in their mission, pulls up behind her. So perhaps this little adventure wasn't really an approved one. Rosemary has indeed grown to be powerful, but she is in control. Chris Redfield has been a presence in her life, possibly as a mentor, but it's not immediately apparent who this agent works for. Questions aside, on this particular day, it seems that Rosemary has got work to do. There's a situation that needs handled. And this is not the end. The BSAA has to be accounted for. In the very least, a new age of bioweaponry has dawned. But who can say where villainy will fall next?